Hello.
Hi! Welcome back to Wired Weirdos, everybody. Unfortunately, a previous episode we tried to do did not work out. But don't you worry, I am currently working on a video where I talk about all the basic points of what we did, so that'll be up at some point.
Yeah, we'll work on getting that up for you guys. So as a stand-in, what would have been episode 4, this episode's now episode 4.
Yes. But anyway, today's episode is about Sonic the Hedgehog, because we are both big ol' Sonic fans. Good ol' me, Maugos, and
SpanishDexter.
oh yeah, so I don't know about you, but I made a little list last night of all the different Sonic games, along with some side stuff and the movies and shows and stuff. So I figured I put it all in order of when they chronologically came out.
All right, that sounds good. Um,
Cool.
for
Was there
me,
anything?
I don't.
Sorry.
Sorry, I don't necessarily have a list, but you know me. I'm pretty much a walking Sonic encyclopedia. So
Awesome. That'll make it easy. Was there anything specifically you wanted to talk about that we could add to the list, or did we just want to go through and just have fun talking about it?
we could just go through the list and have fun talking about it.
Sounds good to me. So, in case you've been living under a rock and don't know what Sonic the Hedgehog is, he is a very popular video game character who was created back in 1991, and pretty much he was made to be a rival to Mario. That went for a little while, but it seems now that's no longer a thing, from what I can tell.
Right.
But yeah, Sonic was originally a just a basic 2D platformer game. You play as Sonic the Hedgehog. He's a little blue hedgehog. Doesn't look anything like a hedgehog, but he fights Dr. Eggman, who used to be shaped like an egg. You get the puns and all that kind of stuff. Ever since then, it's moved on from there. There's bunches of different games, bunches of other friends and enemies he's met. So yeah, so we'll just start it out. The first game was just a very simple platformer. You just play as Sonic. It talked about being able to go fast, but I've found as I've gotten older that the original Sonic the Hedgehog is really not that fast of a game. It's really only Green Hill, the first level, where you can kind of move around real quick, and after that it starts becoming more like a traditional platformer, where it's like kind of slowed down sometimes. You got to move blocks and all sorts of stuff. So I'm not a huge fan of it as I've gotten older, but I do appreciate it for what it started, because without that game, we wouldn't have what we have today.
That is right. Sonic has certainly come a long way.
Oh yeah. Other than that, during that same year, we actually got two other Sonic games, weirdly enough. Apparently, there was a game that only came out, two things. Only came out in Japan. The first one was called Sonic Eraser, which was basically sort of a Tetris-like game with Sonic in it. It's not really that interesting. It's very simple. The one I really like, though, is called Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car, and it's an arcade game, and it was made for young children. And it's basically Sonic as a cop in a cop car chasing after Eggman, who's a villain, and he's like, you have to like use a little steering wheel and stuff, and it's absolutely adorable.
Yes, I've seen the game, and there's an actual arcade version of it. I think that's in a cab that literally looks like the cab from the game.
Aw, it's super cute.
Yeah,
So So yeah, this is why I wanted to make a list, because it's just like there's some things I did not know existed, and this is just like the most adorable thing. I love how in the beginning years there was like a couple of other things like this where they're just like, let's make fun little cute kitty things for Sonic and his friends to do, for kids to play, and it's absolutely wonderful.
it is. I actually just sent you a picture of the car so you can see what it looks like.
Ooh. Oh my god, I love it. I love everything about
Yeah,
this
yeah, it's
thing.
like it's literally like right from the game, and you sit in it and you play the game in it.
Are you still there?
Yeah, yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, sorry, it sounded like you cut out. Anyway, so yeah, so that was Sonic's start. He got very popular very quickly, not just in Japan, but all over the world. He is also known for being very popular in the States and South America as well. So yeah, he's just a very popular character these days as well, just continuing on. He's part of many retro characters that somehow still live.
It, indeed, he's survived a lot of critics over the years.
Oh god, yeah. We'll get to those soon enough.
Oh yeah. But anyways, continue.
Yes, so then next year, 1992, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was made very quickly. It's amazing how fast they could make sequels back in the day, unlike nowadays, unfortunately. But yeah, this one was special for the fact that it introduced Tails the Fox, or Miles Tails Prower, as his full name is. If you don't get the joke behind his name, Miles Prower, it sounds like the words miles per hour. So there you go. Tails is a little two-tailed fox. He can use his tails by rotating them and fly. Very odd. Physically is not possible, but it's a cute little idea. Tails is also known for being a mechanical genius on par with Dr. Eggman, and is basically helps Sonic out by creating planes and other various contraptions depending on the game. So, and this game was pretty much, it took what the original Sonic had and made it what it truly is today. And Sonic 2 is known for basically starting off the proper, like, speedy Sonic games. Because in this game, you actually can run fast in practically every single level. Maybe the last few levels, not so much, but it's understandable because they're supposed to be challenging. But yeah. Anything you want to add?
Nope. I think that's good so far. Well, now that I think about it, just a little bit of tidbit of history. I'm not sure if you were going to cover it or not, but Sonic 2 is infamous for having a lot of lost content from its original beta version.
Oh yes, there's like 5 zones, I think, that were like never truly built or something.
Yes, so Wood Zone was one of them. That was originally supposed to be in the game. Another one was Hidden Palace Zone. So, like, before there was ever even a Hidden Palace Zone in, like, Sonic and Knuckles, it existed in Sonic 2's earlier builds.
Yes, I believe it's in one of the demo levels. Like, if you let the game just stay on the title, you can see it. But it's, like, weirdly enough, not in the rest of the game. And I remember, like, being so confused by that when I was a kid. I was like, where is this level? It doesn't exist.
Yes, and here's what's interesting is that Hidden Palace does exist in the final Sonic 2 release. It's just not the code. It's just set so that you can't get to it from level select. But if you put in the right, I think, cheat code on the sound test menu, there's some trickery you can do where you can hack your way into Hidden Palace. But because Sega cut the level, it loads the level and it loads the music for it, but all the objects are gone. The sprites are all corrupted because they removed that data from the game. But the level layout's still there, so like there's some like weird collision stuff that's still there.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Let's see, and I believe the other 3 zones are like a desert zone, I think a winter zone, and the last one I love, I'll always remember the name of it, it's called Genocide City. I think it's like the most
Yes.
hilarious name.
Yes. And actually, that one never got to leave its concept art because I actually had a copy, or I think I still have a copy of the Sonic 2 beta ROM. And if you load Genocide City, it's just a blue background and you just fall to your death because there's no level data there.
Oh, wow.
So I don't think they ever got that far. They probably, I know there's concept art of it somewhere, but they never got to actually implementing it.
They probably realized when they looked at the name, they're like, this is not a good thing in English.
No, it's not. It's interesting actually because I have played the beta and I have it. Hidden Palace is fully intact. It's fully intact. You can play it as it looked in the old beta screenshots. And
Pretty awesome, actually. So first one I want to talk about is, staying with the mainline series, is Sonic CD. This one's interesting because it was on the Sega CD peripheral, and in case you didn't know about the Sega Genesis back in the day, that thing had a lot of peripherals, and not everyone necessarily had them, so you couldn't always play every single game that came out. Anyway, Sonic CD is interesting for the fact that it was made by a secondary team. There were 2 teams, one made Sonic 2 and one made Sonic CD, and both went in different directions. Sonic 2 really put the series into, like I said, the speedy kind of aspect, but Sonic CD decided to go more like how the original game worked, so it's more about exploration and being a little slow. Obviously, it's not the one that won out overall, but anyway, another important thing is it introduced 2 more characters. Amy Rose, a little pink hedgehog who really loves Sonic. Unfortunately, Sonic has no interest in her, he just sees her as a friend. And Metal Sonic, which is basically like an evil robot Sonic, and he's like the most popular design of all the evil robot Sonics we've had, of which there's been surprisingly a lot of them.
Yes, yes, there is. There's been many iterations of that character.
Yes. In this game, it has an interesting mechanic. You can go through time, going through the past, present, and future. And it's very interesting because it means that every level has different layouts and music depending on what time period you're in. Not only that, but there's two different versions of the future. There's a bad future and a good future, depending on how well you're doing in the game. But yeah, it's a pretty neat thing. I like how the soundtrack is also different between the Japanese and the American versions. I actually like both soundtracks, though a lot of people apparently like the Japanese one better. But anyway, so that was a pretty neat little game. I remember playing this because I was not allowed to Genesis when I was younger, but some Sonic games did go to the PC, and this was the first one they ported over. So I remember having a lot of fun with this.
Yes, I do too. It's funny, I didn't get to play Sonic CD until probably around 2002.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's when I played the PC version first, because growing up, kind of like you, I didn't have the Sega CD peripheral to hook to my Genesis, so I never got the game. Um, so I played the PC version, and it was fun. It's a fun game. I still rate it up there with the other ones today. And as for the soundtrack, I'm one of those people that likes them both. So I'll often find that in every version of the game that's out now, because it's been re-released a few times now on modern platforms, I'll flip-flop between the Japanese soundtrack and the US soundtrack, depending on the mood I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. So, but let's see. After that, there was several side games that came out. For instance, Sonic Spinball was a game that came out on the Genesis, and if you don't know what that is, it's basically Sonic if he was in a giant pinball machine. It's very interesting. It sort of combines like the traditional running around and jumping thing, but then you can jump into pinball sections and all sorts of weird stuff, and very it's fascinating. I personally am not a huge fan of it, but I do know a lot of people do find it interesting, and I've seen a lot of really high level play of that stuff, and it is crazy what is done in that game.
It sure is. As a kid, when I played Sonic Spinball, I wasn't really good at it. I'm still not good at it as an adult. Um,
Yes, tough game.
it's a really tough game. I've never beat it, but I've watched like YouTube videos of people playing through it and beating it. I could never really personally get into it, but I know a lot of people like the game. So
Yeah. Another game came out called Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. This one's interesting because it's a rebranding of another Sega series of games called Puyo Puyo, which is sort of like if you took Tetris and turned it into cute little gooey things where you have to like get them to link up with each other, and then when there's like about four or more, they then disappear, and then you can throw like trash, as they call it, over on your opponent's screen that like clutters up everything, and you and essentially you can battle each other in a way. It's very fascinating. It's a very popular series and has actually become popular in the West now too. You can actually go to arcades and you'll see Puyo Puyo arcade cabinets now.
yes, that's correct. In some of the old school arcades I've been to recently, I've seen some cabinets that are still around and still kicking.
Oh yeah, people love that series. Let's see. On the Game Gear side of things, the first Sonic game came out. Well, no, it wasn't the first one. Both the original and the second games actually got Game Gear versions as well. But this one's the first one that was originally its own thing. And it's called Sonic Chaos. And in this game, you can play as either Sonic or Tails, and you just do your normal thing. You're just going about trying to stop Dr. Eggman from taking over South Island.
Yeah, it kind of has that Sonic 2 energy with the whole Tails and Sonic thing going on with it.
Yeah, this
Um,
is back in the days where it's just Sonic and Tails were just doing their thing. No one else was really around. Like Amy was introduced, but she was just in CD.
right. Fun fact there's actually a bunch of fans who got together and remade Sonic Chaos as a traditional Genesis version of the game.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that. That game has amazing music.
Oh yeah, it really does. I see the soundtracks get remixed by a lot of people.
Yeah. Next up on the list, another arcade game came out called Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, which, if you're wondering why it had to have Sega in front, it's because at the time, and I still find it funny that they did this, Sega didn't really know if they actually had the copyright on Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, something was happening legally, and they were unsure. Thankfully, their fears were unfounded. They did, in fact, own the copyright, but for a little bit, they were unsure about that. So, a few Sonic games, particularly on the arcades, had Sega in front of Sonic's name to differentiate it. So, but this one's interesting. It introduces two more characters in the form of Ray the Flying Squirrel and Mighty the Armadillo, and basically the three of them get kidnapped by Dr. Eggman, thrown into a giant prison, and it's like full of traps, and you have to like run out of it, kind of thing. It's super crazy and all that kind of stuff. And the way you control them is but with a tracking ball. I believe it's the only Sonic game that uses a tracking ball as controls.
That's correct. It's definitely an interesting game. Um, it actually, the character Mighty the Armadillo. Just fun fact: this is his first appearance in the series before he actually became part of a later game called Knuckles Chaotix.
Yep.
Um,
See. But yeah, after that, we then have Sega Sonic Cosmo Fighter Galaxy Patrol. Say that 5 times fast. This is yet another game in the little kid kind of arcade games they did. It's really cute as well. You play as Sonic as basically a space cop going after Dr. Eggman as opposed to being just a regular cop like the previous game.
I
Also, it, along with a lot of the Sonic arcade games, had actual voice acting as well. It's very cute to listen to hear the earliest version of what they were assuming Sonic and Dr. Eggman's voices would be.
That is very interesting. Believe it or not, until you mentioned this game, I didn't even know about it.
Oh yeah, like I knew about the other one sort of, but this one I was just like, oh, they made a second one. That's really cool. So it too is very cute. And then after that comes another cute one, Sega Sonic Popcorn Shop. This one is one of the most adorable things I've ever seen. It's an arcade game, but not at the same time. It's basically a popcorn machine. And what you do is you start it up, and both Sonic and Tails are basically, quote unquote, making popcorn for you, but Dr. Eggman tries to get in the way and cause trouble, so the little kid has to, like, push buttons and turn wheels and stuff to get Dr. Eggman out of the way, kind of thing. And then then Sonic and Tails will also help by, Sonic helps by putting all the popcorn in the bag, and Tails uses his tails to like cool it off, kind of thing. And then at the end, you get a bag of popcorn. It's absolutely adorable. I love it.
I'm taking a look at pictures of the machine right now, and I would definitely try this.
I know, right?
It's just the concept itself is so cool. It's like I wish we still had immersive like experiences like this more often. It just seems like that time period when they were really experimental with this stuff is just kind of gone to the wayside these days.
Oh yeah, like back in the early days of video games, there was just they didn't really know what was going to catch yet, so they just threw everything at the wall.
Yeah, they sure did. But anyways, that's pretty cool.
Yes, and from here we now move away from the games because this is when Sonic starts getting TV shows. And there were two that were made during this era. Sonic the Hedgehog, also known as Sonic Sat AM, called that because it aired on Saturday mornings, and Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, in case you're wondering why there's two different shows going on at the exact same time, it's because the two shows have very different theming. Sonic the Hedgehog is much more dark. It's basically Dr. Eggman, which in the States at the time was known as Dr. Robotnik. He's basically taken over the world, like, kind of thing. Like, he's taken down the kingdom that the characters lived in, and he's, like, turned everyone into robots, and there's just, like, a small group of them who didn't get turned, and they're back hiding off in the woods, kind of thing, and they go in and they try to attack him and take down everything. Meanwhile, the other one, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, just has Sonic and Tails going around, and it's very comedic. Like that show is almost Looney Tunes and how silly it is, kind of thing. So it's very amusing to see the difference between these two shows. But yeah, that's why they did it because they weren't sure if kids wanted the dark one or if they wanted the more silly one. And from what I know, both of them did really well.
They did. I remember as a kid getting to watch them both, but at the time as a kid, because I couldn't always watch them at the same time, I often got them confused because I couldn't tell one from the other. And then finally, once I realized how serious one was and how like cartoony the other one was, I was like, okay, now I know there's a difference. Um,
Right.
and what also doesn't help either is that they actually share the same voice cast. J.L.
Yes.
White voices Sonic in both series.
Yes, so it can be confusing, and they're both drawn similar as well, so it doesn't help. But yeah, it's also kind of cute in the long run because these also brought about some interesting stuff. Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, I know, is more considered like cult following nowadays. Like, there's not too much in the way of like continuation from that. But the other one, oh boy, this one was made alongside also the comic series that was being made by the Archie Comics company. Yes, the same people who make Archie, that silly redheaded kid. But yeah, they introduced the freedom fighter characters such as Sally Acorn, and if you know who she is, oh yeah, you know full well where this is going. But yeah, it's led into quite a fandom of those particular characters, and why a lot of people were very saddened when those comics got ended, which we might talk about later. But I don't really know if we want to talk about that whole drama necessarily.
I feel like that the whole thing could be like its own dedicated episode.
Oh gods, right? But yeah, those are those two shows. I believe they both lasted about 2 seasons each. I think.
That's about right. I'm looking at it right now, actually. So the Sat AM series was 2 seasons. It started in September 18th, 1993, and then the series ended in December 3rd, 1994.
Cool. All right, and I do know that Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog also had a special Christmas episode, which is infamous because it has an old version of Sally in it. She doesn't say anything, but she's just there for a few seconds and then never seen again.
And I didn't know that she had an appearance in this one.
Yes, it's an old version of her too. It's back when it was like the original design she had when she was pink with black hair. Like it's not even the normal brown furred red haired version of her.
Wow.
Yeah, very interesting. Moving on, now we got 1994. This is where I think the peak of the original classic games were going on, because this is the year that Sonic the Hedgehog 3 came out, as well as its, I guess, technical sequel of Sonic and Knuckles. This one's interesting for the fact that it's technically the same game the whole way through, it's just split into two different games. So each one, I think, has like 7 levels kind of thing, and it's like dealing with Dr. Eggman crashing on what is known as Angel Island, where we meet the character of Knuckles the Echidna, a big old brash red echidna who also does not look anything like an echidna, but he's got big spiked fists, and he's got a bad temper, and he protects the Master Emerald, which is his giant Chaos Emerald that keeps the island afloat in the sky. It's a rather fascinating one. We're also introduced to, from the last game, the Death Egg, which is this giant Star Wars thing that you get into at the very end to try and defeat Dr. Eggman. But yeah, it's, Sonic and Tails again are trying to defeat him. In the second game, Sonic and Knuckles becomes playable as well, and it also introduced the lock-on system, where the Sonic and Knuckles cartridge, you could put in other games into it, specifically Sonic games. Like if you put Sonic 3 on it, you can now play both games as if they were just one continuous game. And even better, you could play as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles through all of these levels, instead of just Sonic being the only one who could go through them all. I believe you could also connect Sonic 2 to it so that you could play as Knuckles in Sonic 2. And if you connected the original Sonic the Hedgehog, you could play like I think a never-ending like blue spheres kind of thing, which is the bonus levels from the Sonic 3 and Knuckles games where you collect the Chaos Emeralds.
Yep, that's all correct. And originally, at one point, as you mentioned, they were supposed to be one game, Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, but they had to split it off because of time constraints, and because at the time, the chips that were being made for the cartridge couldn't hold all the data. They thought it was going to be too expensive to have a cartridge that had double the chip size or capacity in it. Although this is kind of interesting because the Sonic 3 beta shows that they were able to fit it on one ROM chip. So I don't know what happened, but Sonic 3 has a long development history, and there's, I think, like 8 or 9 different betas that you can go download right now.
Fascinating. That's cool. I believe there's also, what was it, like Michael Jackson, I think, was involved with the music or something?
That is correct. He actually did compose parts of the soundtrack. That was confirmed.
Neat. Let's see. After that, there's also Sonic Triple Trouble for the Game Gear. This introduces the character of, I guess, take your pick on the name. Either he's called Knack the Weasel or Fang the Sniper, I believe. He's a very odd-looking character. I'm never really sure what he is. Like, I don't think he's actually a weasel, but I could be wrong. So he's a bit of a villain character. I don't believe he's working for Dr. Eggman specifically, but he is just causing trouble. And it's kind of neat because both Sonic and Tails have like different ways of play in this game, which is fascinating. Like Tails gets a little submersible submarine thingy. So
Yeah, it's I've never got to play this one, but it definitely looks interesting. I do know that there's actually fans that remade this one as well.
ooh, that's
Yeah.
cool. Let's see. After that, there's also Sonic Drift. This is the first of the Sonic racing games, of which there are plenty of, which makes sense. Sonic's all about speed. Of course, you want to make racing games with them. Weirdly enough, though, in this one, you play in cars like Mario Kart. So I feel like Sega did this because Mario had made Mario Kart around this time as well. So makes sense.
It does. I mean, they were trying to compete with Nintendo on everything. Like, if Mario did one thing, Sega's like, okay, how can we like try to like go against this?
Oh yeah, big rivalry back in the day. Remember in the playground, people getting into wars about which was better, Nintendo or Sega.
Oh, those were the days.
Let's see. Also, at this time, Sega made a little system called the Sega Pico, which again, another peripheral for the Genesis, and it was made for young children. It was basically a sort of an edutainment type of system, and there was two Sonic games on it. There was Sonic the Hedgehog's Game World, where you basically play little simple puzzle games to defeat Dr. Eggman, and like most of the Sonic characters at the time were all in it. And then there's Tales and the Music Maker, which was basically like a music making game. It's Tales, he's figuring out music, kind of stuff. And like I said, this is like very simple stuff. It was meant for children that were just learning, 3, 4 years old, something like that.
Right, and I don't have much to say on those because as a kid, I never even got to even see or touch those games. I know nothing about them.
I only have a vague memory of when they first came out to the States and seeing Tales and the Music Maker. I do know this did not do very well. Weirdly enough, the Pico actually lasted a long time. It lasted into like the mid, I think 2000s kind of thing. Like it has like some Pokemon games. Weirdly enough, on it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they're official too. Like Nintendo sanctioned these things. It's very odd. Moving on from there, though, 1995 now, we were introduced to Knuckles' first lone game, which is Knuckles Chaotix for the Sega 32X. Yet another peripheral that you put on the Genesis. If I recall, this thing basically just gave more RAM power to the Genesis, I think, so it could like do 32-bit games rather than just 16-bit.
Yeah, something like that. So basically, it's just an extension of the Genesis. It would actually add two more CPUs, more RAM. This is, for the nerds out there, tech nerds out there, this is back when Sega was first starting to use the Hitachi Super H CPUs in a lot of their consoles. Like, I think this kicked it off because this thing that plugged into the Genesis had two of those monsters inside of them, and then
Damn.
more RAM, as my associate had just mentioned. And you could plug in a specialized game cartridge that would only run on the 32X connector, or peripheral that would plug into this thing. So it's like, now I'm just picturing like having a Sega CD in my Genesis, having a 32X plugged on top of it. This thing is going to look like a monster on my entertainment center.
Oh yeah, it's like this big towering thing. It's ridiculous. But see, Knuckles Chaotix also introduced some things. The game has it so that you play as two characters at once. You've got a lead character and a follower character, and you're connected with these little magical rings that create like sort of a line between them. And there's Knuckles, obviously, but there's also a few other characters. We've also got Espio the Chameleon, Mighty the Armadillo comes back, we've got Vector the Crocodile, and Charmy Bee. And every one of these characters has their own specific qualities. Knuckles can do his usual thing where he can bash through things and glide through the air. Mighty is sort of like has defensive qualities. If I recall, Espio can do sort of his chameleon thing where you can kind of disappear on stuff and go up walls. And Vector has like a larger spin dash, I believe, because he's so big. And Charmy can just plain fly. And if I recall, he was the broken character.
That is
Because
correct.
yes, because unlike Tails, Charmy doesn't tire out. He can fly forever. So you can just get through the levels real fast with him. But yeah, that was a unique little game.
So,
From there, there's also a bunch of Game Gear games that came out.
I
There's a... Oh, sorry?
real quick, I just wanted to add something on Knuckles Chaotix.
Yes.
So in its development cycle, it actually started out as a game called Sonic Crackers. That
Well,
was
I've heard about that.
that was developed on the Genesis first, which I have that ROM as well. It's very early build. It has some music that ended up in Chaotix. It has like some earlier versions of the levels, and instead of Knuckles and another character, it's Sonic and Tails using the mechanism that you were just talking about, the combi system with the rings that are stretching the two characters across the platform. That was the first build of Knuckles Chaotix before Sega realized, oh, well, maybe this will sell better if we change this to Knuckles, because he doesn't get much of the spotlight, and he's pretty popular because this was shortly after, Sonic and Knuckles. So I think that's how we ended up getting to Knuckles Chaotix from that build.
Yep. I believe this was the time where they decided to take some of the other characters and give them games, because from here, there's also two Tails games that were on Game Gear. One called Tails Sky Patrol, and the other called Tails Adventure. And they're interesting for the fact that Tails Sky Patrol is more or less a game that takes place in the air, where Tails is like fighting off these like evil robot birds. And Tails Adventure is sort of a slower paced adventure game. And I believe they're both supposed to be like prequels, like they're like this is Tails before he met Sonic kind of thing. So he's not like overly fast yet. But it's fascinating. I haven't actually played them myself, but they look interesting.
Yeah, I've heard of them. They do look interesting.
Yeah. There's also this other game I have played around with, which is terrible, called Sonic Labyrinth, also on the Game Gear. And basically it answers the question of, what if you took Sonic's speed away? You make a terrible game, is what you make. But yeah, basically the game is Sonic's shoes have been taken, and he's been giving... Dr. Eggman, like, swaps his shoes out for these slow-mo shoes that take away his speed, and then traps Sonic in a giant labyrinth that he has to use like his spin dash to get through. So yeah, the game is awful because you move very slowly and you can only get around with the spin dash, but of course the spin dash makes you bounce around because it's in 3D. Well, isometric really, but yeah, it's a very weird game. It's annoying to play. I did not care for it.
I mean, I've seen screenshots and heard things about it, and I think that's as far as my experience goes. I don't think I want to play it because of the fact that Sonic
No.
can't move.
Yeah, like I said, it's very annoying because his movement under normal circumstances is very slow and just terrible, and you can only move around with the spin dash, which makes you bounce around the walls. So it's like, well, I don't have any real proper control in this.
Right.
But yeah, from there, though, there was also Sonic Drift 2, so we had a second in the Sonic Kart games, which was very quick, I gotta say. I'm surprised how fast I made this one. But yeah, it also, just like the previous one, it has Sonic and all the other characters that had been introduced at the time, kind of thing. So, but moving on. Next, we have 1996, where we are introduced to Sega properly trying out 3D in the form of Sonic 3D Blast, which was on the Genesis. It also got ported to the PC. I remember playing it. It's interesting for the fact that the entire game is done isometrically. And in case you don't know what isometric means, it means that the entire game is at sort of a slant. And it's done that way so that it makes 2D objects look like they're in a 3D space, when really that's not actually what's happening. So it's very weird. The whole thing basically means that you're constantly running in diagonals rather than just like straight forward or whatnot. And it's also cute because it brought the Flicky birds back. They were sort of a thing before. They actually had their own game originally, but they were now properly part of the Sonic series. It's just one of the many little critters that you could help. And the whole game is basically Sonic saving these little birds and helping them get back, I guess, to their dimension or something. And yeah, then you defeat Dr. Eggman at the end.
Yeah, it's the Flickies. You're actually trying to help the Flicky birds, which, interesting enough, Flicky has their own game that came out back in like 1992, I think.
Yep.
Um, so it's funny how that ties into that. Also, this game was known for being developed around the time that Sonic Extreme was being developed, and this game kind of played a role in that piece of it as well.
Yes, yes, that one has a bit of drama behind it as well. Would you like to talk about it?
Real quick, just really quick. So basically, 3D Blast was developed alongside of another game called Sonic Extreme, and at the time, Extreme was for the Sega Saturn, because I guess the idea was to put 3D Blast on not just the Genesis but also the Saturn, because they wanted to take advantage of the Saturn's higher graphics capabilities than anything that the Genesis or the 32X could do. Um,
Right.
and well, basically, Sega made life hell for the team working on Sonic Extreme because the team back when Sonic games were being developed around this time period in the 90s, it wasn't always just Sonic Team Japan. Yes, Sonic Team Japan did the very first Sonic game, but after that, Sega Technical Institute, which is based in America, was working on the games with some assistance from some members of Japan. Um, so just all those games you've played in the 90s, you can thank Sega Technical Institute for a big chunk of them. So STI was working on Sonic Extreme, but the constraints that Sega of Japan was giving them was making it almost nearly impossible to reach the December deadline they were trying to reach. I guess they had a tight window to try to get the game out by the holidays, and it just wasn't going to happen. They also had staff that were getting sick from just being stressed out all the time. I remember an incident where Yuji Naka was like letting them use the Knights engine to speed up development, and then like I want to say maybe they had the game 30 or 40% in on the Knights engine and it was going good. And Naka like then decided, oh no, I don't want to use the Knights engine, so I'm gonna pull that from you now. Um,
Jeez.
yeah, it was nuts when I was reading the backstory behind it, but the game would have been a nice hit because it actually sort of resembles what the modern Sonic games look like today in 3D, which would have been impressive for the time on the Genesis. I mean, sorry, on the Sega Saturn.
Yeah. It like you said, like I think it would have done completely fine if they had actually been able to finish it and all, but yeah, Sega unfortunately decided to be Sega as they usually do.
Unfortunately, yes, but that's all I wanted to say on that.
Oh, no problem. That said, there is an actual 3D Sonic game that came out during this time, known as Sonic the Fighters. This was an arcade fighting game involving Sonic and many of his friends, which is downright great, I have to admit, because I found that every single time Sonic is involved with a fighting game, it actually does very well. I don't know why they don't make more of them. But yeah, this is a traditional style fighting game. You can play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, a bunch of others. There's like two made up ones that they did, which are Bean the Dynamite, who's like a woodpecker, I believe, and Bark the polar bear, which I gotta say, funny name to give a polar bear.
Yes, I agree. Definitely some funny names there. Some fun facts about this game. It was not actually developed by Sonic Team. So at the time, Sonic Team shared a building with Sega's AM2 division. Now, anyone who knows Sega AM2 probably already knows what their bread and butter is fighting games. What do they make? Virtua Fighter. So the Virtua Fighter team was like, for ha-has, putting Sonic in Virtua Fighter, and I guess one day Yuji Naka, because he was like down the hall, was walking by and happened to see the guys in AM2 working on it. And then he's like, I actually want this as a game now. And then I guess there was coordination between Sonic Team and Sega AM2, and basically Sonic Team says, yeah, we want you guys to work on this for us. So that's how you end up with Sonic the Fighters.
Yes, it is a really fun game. Personally, I think it's also really funny because the characters are treated like Looney Tune characters, so they're sort of like squashing and stretching all over. And when you hit characters, like rings fly out of them, even though it's not actually the health. It's just cute that they added in that reference. I also know that there was a character named Honey the Cat who was originally going to be playable, but she wasn't finished. But in a later version of the game, they did finish her, so now she is a playable character, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. That's right, because when they re-released the game for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, I think they included her in that.
Yep. The fun part also is that she's a reference to another game that they've made called Fighting Vipers,
Yes.
as because she is wearing the same outfit as a character from that game.
Yes, I was just looking into that, and now that I'm gonna say this again, I said Virtua Fighter at first, but it was Fighting Vipers that the game was built on. So so the Fighting Vipers engine was what they used to build Sonic the Fighters.
There you go. Like I've said before, this game is great. Other Sonic fighting games are great. Even when he's in Smash Brothers, it's also great. That's why I think it's very funny that Sega doesn't make more of them. But oh well. Going from a really great game to a terrible game, Sonic Schoolhouse for the PC was also brought out in 1996, and this game is infamous for how horrifying it is. Basically, it was originally going to be a different game with like a clock as the main character, but then at the last minute they were like, "Oh my god, we can make so much more money if we put Sonic in this." So they like rushed in Sonic and stuff, and he's like very weird because he's like stationary, he never moves, and they had to call in like the actress of the clock character, and we're like, "We need you to say a few things and say you're Sonic," kind of thing.
Oh
So it's a
no.
very amusingly weird game. In case you're wondering what it is, it's basically an edutainment game. Sonic basically teaches you like basic math and other kinds of stuff, and you play as a little avatar of an animal, which makes sense, you're with Sonic. But like I said, it's also known for being horrifying because a lot of it's very stationary, and it's very creepy because of that.
Yes, I just started searching on Google for images of this game, and well, I think you'll see on the chat on your end
Oh,
what
I've
this
seen it
looks like.
already.
Yeah, yeah, it's literally they just cut and paste Sonic in this, and that's what they did.
Yes, it's very weird. That said, though, this year also introduced the Sonic the Hedgehog OVA. And in case you're wondering what OVA means, it's original video. Oh crap, I forgot the last word. But anyway,
Animation.
base animation. Thank you. But yeah, basically, this was a originally it was two parts, like two separate movies that had like the same story going through, and was brought to the states later in 1999 as just a full movie called Sonic the Hedgehog the movie. And it's a very interesting movie. I personally love it for how bad I think it is, as I find it very ridiculous. The characters have very odd voices, not just in the American version, but in the English version as well. And it's got an absolutely bonkers plot, and it's kind of so bad it's good to me.
I can agree with that. But I remember as a kid watching this, thinking I was like, "Oh my god, this is the coolest thing ever!"
I mean, there are some cool elements, like Sonic and Metal Sonic's fight is pretty awesome. Like, and definitely brings in the whole like DBZ crowd because I don't know about you, but it's there's definitely an overlap between those two franchises.
Oh, absolutely. There's an overlap. Seven Chaos Emeralds, seven Dragon Balls,
Yep.
Supersonic, Super Saiyan. Like there is an overlap. It's like very likely that if you like Sonic, you probably like DBZ, or if you like DBZ, you probably like Sonic at some level. So
Oh yeah.
so it's really really interesting. Just a little bit of tidbit of info I wanted to put out here too is they ended up releasing this direct to video in 1999 on September 7th to try to get it to release at the same time as Sonic Adventure.
Really?
Yes, so like originally it was out in Japan on January 26, 1996, but they split it in two tapes or two episodes. So like there was a first episode that came out January 26th of that year, and then March 22nd of that year was the second episode. And then finally, when they said, all right, we're going to release a home to video version of it, they waited until September 7th, 1999 to do that.
Huh. Neat.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I would definitely recommend this movie simply because, like I said, it's very bonkers and weird, and honestly, it's kind of fun to watch because of that. And like I said, but at the same time, your mileage may vary depending on the voices because some of them are very, very annoying.
Well, fun fact for any of those who are anime fans, this was dubbed by ADV Films, and that's an old, old dubbing studio in the U.S. for anime that I hadn't heard that name in years.
They don't exist anymore, do they?
I don't think they do. I think they went out of business in 1996. Actually, no, they like 2008 actually is when they went out of business. And guess what? Funimation took over them.
Oh,
So
well, there you go. They got bought out.
yep, they got bought out by Funimation.
Well, happy endings, I guess.
I guess so.
Let's see. Next up is 1997. Only one Sonic-related game came out this year, and that was Sonic R, another racing game. This one is sort of contentious, though. I own this as well. This is also another one that got ported to the PC. And it's interesting. This one does not involve the characters in cars, unless you count Amy. She's the only one in a car. But yeah, it's basically Sonic and the other characters running around on foot. It's completely in 3D, too, which is fascinating. But I would not call it the greatest of racing games. There's a lot of like weirdness to the movement. Like the characters are very slippery in this game, and it also is very short. There's only 5 race tracks that you can get on. But what's interesting is that there's like secret characters, and they each replace one of the other main racers each time you unlock one of them. You start with 5 characters: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Eggman. And then there's 5 secret characters in the form of one of the egg robots from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. You can get what is known as... You can get Metal Sonic as well, and then you can get what is known as Puppet Tails, which is this creepy little robot doll of Tails that floats around. And you can get Mecha Knuckles, which is basically an evil robot Knuckles as well. And then there's Super Sonic as a character as well, and he is the best character, and no one can beat him because he's super annoyingly fast. So yeah, it's also well infamous for its music. It's got this very late 90s sounding, like, God, how do you describe it? It's like these ladies who are singing,
R&B.
and it's very like R&B. Yes, it's a very R&B type of soundtrack, which I think is the only time that it was ever that kind of thing in a Sonic game. So yeah, the game is infamous for its very weird controls, the crazy secret characters, and the very unique soundtrack. I would say definitely check it out. It's an odd one.
It is an odd one, and just to add to some of the info, the singer's name is T.J. Davis. She actually has a Twitter too. Let's see.
Oh, she's still around.
She's still around, and actually, she's well known in the Sonic community. She's actually gone to Sonic conventions as as a guest. And she also has done the music for another Sega game, Metropolis Street Racer.
That's cool.
And she has a very, very good voice. I've heard her tracks in Metropolis Street Racer, and I'm like, oh, yeah, they're popping. I love these tracks. And that game came out for Dreamcast, by the way. So just
Wow.
a little bit of info on her.
Yeah, well, I'm glad she's doing well, and I'm glad she took the whole Sonic thing well as well, too. Good on her.
Yeah, good on her. But anyways, just wanted to add that.
Yeah, that's cool. Next up, technically we're going to do 1999 and 99 together because Sonic Adventure actually came out in Japan in 1999. Well, it came out in 1998, sorry. Sonic Adventure came out in 1998 for Japan first, and then 99 for the rest of the world. But it was very close on that, so we're going to treat it like it's 1999 anyway. But yeah, this is the first proper mainline Sonic game, and it started so much. First off, the big thing about it was that they completely redid the art style to it, which didn't change too much, really. Like, Tails and Knuckles, for instance, are not hugely different, but Sonic definitely has a different look to him, and both Amy and Eggman got completely redone in their designs. Like, Amy's wearing a completely new dress. Her quills are now, like, downward rather than backwards, looking just like Sonic's. She's got these big high boots. Eggman's outfit is completely different. It's got this, like, overly, like, mad scientist kind of, like, gentleman look to him kind of thing. And also this game introduced 2 more characters in the form of Big the Cat and E102 Gamma, the robot, which is, I think, the first time an Eggman robot was made a playable character in a Sonic game. Which, I know, the Eggman robot was in Sonic R, but this is the first time in the mainline series. So yeah, and the game is, like I said, it's 3D. It's Sonic running around in 3D and all that kind of stuff. And all six playable characters can all have their own ways of play. You know, Tails is racing Sonic, Knuckles is looking for the Master Emerald shards, Amy's running away from an evil robot, Big is fishing, and Gamma is shooting things. But yeah, it's a neat one. It's also the first Sonic game to have like a truly proper storyline to it. Like there's an actual story going through the whole thing. There's, I think this is the first time they ever put in proper voice acting as well. There's just so much going on with this game. Anything else you wanted to add?
At the moment, I don't think so. I think you covered a lot of the groundwork. It definitely set a tone for a generation of Sonic games. I will say that.
Oh gods, yes. Like I said, there's also the character Big the Cat. I just want to touch on this because I honestly hate his gameplay. Big is a fishing character. Yes, they put a freaking fishing minigame in a Sonic game. And I did not like playing Big. I do not care for the character. He is done up to be sounding like he's super stupid. And yeah, I did not care for him.
Well, you're gonna love him because he appears in a later Sonic game again with the fishing mechanic.
So I've heard. Anyway, we'll get to that though. After that though, there was also a few other games that came out in '99. There's also Sonic the Hedgehog Pocket Adventure. This was on the Neo Geo Pocket Color, which was basically Neo Geo's answer to the Game Boy. And yeah, it was basically a 2D Sonic game on a Game Boy kind of place. I think this is the first time Sonic, after the Game Gear, was on a portable device as well. So it's not a bad game. It's kind of weird because it sort of combines a lot of like levels and music from both Sonic 2 and Sonic 3. So it's kind of weird how they mix them together. Like there's Emerald Hill from Sonic 2, yet it has the music of Mushroom Hill from Sonic and Knuckles.
Yeah.
Very strange.
Very strange.
So, but at the same time, there was also a new show that came out this year called Sonic Underground. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a huge fan of this show. It's kind of weird. This one is interesting. Once again, Jaleel White comes back as Sonic the Hedgehog, but it's fascinating because it's a completely unique story of its own. The premise is that Sonic and his two siblings, Sonia and Manic the Hedgehogs, are the children of the queen, I forget her name,
Alita.
of the land. Thank you. But yeah, basically Dr. Robotnik takes over the world again, and the queen has to go into hiding, and she basically scatters her three kids to different families to be like, I need someone to take care of them while I'm gone, kind of thing. And they're like infants or something, so they don't even know her at the time. And yeah, the whole story is just them going up against Dr. Eggman, and for some reason they can use musical instruments as weapons as well.
Yeah, their method of defeating their enemies is song.
Yeah.
And, I'm guilty. I have this one on DVD just because I'm like, I have to have a copy of this masterpiece.
Oh, no problem, dude. You enjoy what you want, kind of thing. I do believe this is also the first time Knuckles was in one of the TV shows as well. So there you have it. Knuckles finally showed up animated.
Yep.
Let's see. After this is 2000, where the game Sonic Shuffle came into being. This is basically Sega's answer to Mario Party. It's exactly what you think it is. It's Sonic and his friends in a Mario Party-esque kind of place. Weirdly enough, it has a story as well. It involves a little fairy named, I think, Luma? And she calls Sonic and his friends over to help her because, like, the big fairy lady she worked with, like, disappeared, and now everything's, like, gone to shit, and they need to get these new Chaos Emerald type things to save everything, and there's this other little weirdo fairy who's just, like, causing trouble, and blah, blah, blah. It's honestly not that interesting.
Yeah, I never got this game when I had it on Dreamcast, but I ended up later on getting to play it. It's okay. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I had it on Dreamcast myself. My friends and I tried playing it one time only. And yeah, like I said, it's just Mario Party. So, there you go. Next up in 2001, though, we got some fun stuff. First off, Sonic Adventure 2 came out. So if you don't know, the original Sonic Adventure is infamous for being sort of buggy and glitchy, and is even worse in some of its later ports. But Sonic Adventure 2 took a lot of that and made it much better. Here, the graphics are made better. There's a much more interesting storyline this time around, even though I do think Sonic Adventure's story is interesting, but here it's much more personal. Because the story involves Gerald Robotnik, who is the grandfather of Dr. Eggman. And in here, we also learn that Dr. Eggman had a cousin named Maria, and the two of them lived up on the space station Ark, where something tragic happened, and from there, a project that Gerald had been working on, which turned out to be the character of Shadow the Hedgehog, who's introduced here, uh, basically got sent to Earth, and the military got it and everything like that. We also are introduced to the character of Rouge the Bat, who it turns out is a spy and helping out the bad guys kind of thing. So the game is interesting for the fact that you play as two different teams. You have Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and then you have Shadow, Rouge, and Eggman. And they're basically mirrors on each other. Sonic and Shadow work the same, Tails and Eggman work the same, and Knuckles and Rouge work the same. Sonic and Shadow's levels are basically just the traditional stuff. You run from one end to the other kind of thing. Tails and Eggman are in big old mech robot things that can shoot stuff, so they're sort of similar to Gamma from the previous game. And Knuckles redoes his whole Emerald Shard hunting thing, of which Rouge does the same. So, and yeah, it's an interesting game. I have to admit, I think the story is probably one of the best stories in the series. Even though I'm not huge on Sonic being dramatic, I do think it's an interesting plot. But yeah,
I I agree with that. I think it did the interesting plot right. I'm actually reading and it was praised for its voice acting for the time and the plot. It's actually one of the few Sonic games that tried to take itself seriously.
I think it's nice because it's like it's serious, but it's still keeping the comedic things that I like about the series as well. Plus, it's still like colorful, like I like as well. It's very fast paced. Even like Tails and Eggman, though they're plodding along, they're constantly shooting stuff. So there's constant action. So I personally think it was a pretty fun game. Plus, it has one of the best final boss themes, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Anyone who knows the title Live and Learn knows this game.
Oh yeah. So there's that. Also, we were introduced to the first game in the Sonic Advance series for the Game Boy Advance. In case you don't know, this is when Sega finally started playing nice with Nintendo. And to cut the long story short, basically, Sega nearly went bankrupt, got lucky, someone bailed them out, and they basically stopped making consoles. This is right about when the Dreamcast got canceled, basically. So ever since, Sega has never made any consoles ever since that time and has been making games for other companies instead.
That's correct. And actually, Sonic Adventure 2 capped off the Dreamcast. That was the last game, I think, that actually came out for Dreamcast.
Yep. Oh, right. And Sonic Advance itself is basically a traditional 2D Sonic game. It's fun for the fact that there are four playable characters. They made Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy playable. And basically, you just run through 2D levels. There's not too much to the story. It's just Eggman being a jerk like usual. But it's fascinating because of Amy. Like, both Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles all work like they did in previous 2D games. So you've got their usual powers. You know, Tails can fly, Knuckles can glide and climb. But Amy's fascinating because I believe this is the first time she was playable in a 2D game. And I always thought of her as the hard mode version of this game because, unlike the other three, she doesn't do the little spin jump like they do. She can be easily hit while she's in the air. Like, the only time she can fight is when using her Pico Pico hammer. So she can spin in the air once, but after that, you know, she's vulnerable again. So she's fascinating to play in that game.
Yeah, she definitely is. It's like they try to take some of her Sonic Adventure 1 moveset and try to see what that would look like in 2D.
Yep. Personally, I think it works. It's just that you have to be more careful with her. So that was pretty neat. Another game that came out, this is the first mobile game for Sonic in 2001, which was Sonic Tennis. And it is exactly what you think it is. It is Sonic and his friends playing tennis. It's a very simple game because this is, remember, this is 2001, so we're not into smartphones yet. It's a very simple, very archaic game.
Yep, the
So,
simple flip phone games, I call them.
yes. So keep in mind, this is back when you had to use the buttons on the phone. Remember when phones had buttons?
What are those again?
Oh. But next up is 2002, where we have a bunch of games. First off is Sonic Advance 2 came out. That was a pretty quick turnaround. This one introduced the character of Cream the Rabbit. She is an adorable little girl. She is, like I just said, she's a rabbit. I believe she's the youngest of all the Sonic characters, and I think she's like 6 or something like that. And she has a little chow friend with her named Cheese, so they're Cream and Cheese. Very cute. She I always really liked playing this game because Cream is absolutely overpowered in it. She has flight capabilities like Tails, and her friend Cheese is basically a homing missile attack.
Yes, that's right.
And the way the bosses work in this game is that you're running alongside each other. Like, yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I don't think they've ever done this kind of boss fight style ever again. But yeah, Cream is just so overpowered because she doesn't have to get anywhere near the boss. All she has to do is just tell Cheese to go and hit it, and he just goes flying across the screen and hits them. So you just sit back and just keep telling Cheese to go until the boss is done.
That is always nice when you want to just cheese your way, literally cheese your way through the
Yes.
game.
Yeah, it's also interesting for the fact that Amy is a secret character in the game, which is weird. Like, I never understood why she's an unlockable character in the game, but she is. Another interesting thing about the game is that they kind of streamline the character's abilities. Like, everyone has the spin jump, even Amy does. Like, she still has her hammer abilities, but she can now just do a normal, regular jump on enemies kind of stuff. But another thing I found, and I figured this out while playing the game originally, way back when, but the characters actually have different stats. Like, Amy's actually the slowest character. She has a really bad spin dash, and like Sonic's really fast, but he sometimes is a little slippery compared to other characters. And Tails is somewhat slow, but he has like the better flight capabilities. Like Cream cannot stay in the air nearly as long as Tails. Like it's very interesting little like differences between the characters. So I found that fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating that they made all those differences.
Yep. And then, of course, comes a fun thing. Apparently, a whole ton of other mobile games came out during this time. First off, there was Sonic Racing Shift Up, which is just a Sonic racing game. There's Sonic Golf, Sonic Billiards, Sonic Fishing, Sonic Bowling, all of them exactly what you think they are. And another game called Good Friend Chow, which was basically what people have been wanting forever, but apparently it did happen on an archaic phone. It's basically a Chow Tamagotchi. So yeah, if you wanted to, raise a Chow, then this was the game for you.
And fun fact, I think that it sounds like they got that idea from the Sega Dreamcast VMU memory cards that were game consoles themselves, where if you
Yes.
played Sonic Adventure, you could save your Chow data to a VMU unit on your Dreamcast controller, pull it out of the Dreamcast controller, and play the game by itself where you take care of your Chow.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know why they've never gone back to this. I know so many people who would love to have something like this.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many fans that have been begging for the Chows to come back.
Yeah. Oh well. They still show up in some capacities, like that recent little animation of Knuckles. There's like little chows all over the place while he's like searching for stuff.
Yep, that's true.
So there's that at least. But anyway, next is 2003. We get the next game in the main series, which is Sonic Heroes. This one is, I think, the first proper game that was made with different consoles in mind. Because it's like on the GameCube and PlayStation 2 at the time, I believe.
It's on the GameCube, the PlayStation 2, and the original Xbox.
Right. So this one is interesting for the fact of what you do. You play as 3 characters at once. So you've got like a team of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and what you can do is you can swap between them, each with different types of abilities and capabilities. Sonic is the fast one. He also has the homing attack. He can create a spinning vortex and it helps you get up like poles and stuff. There's Tails, who can fly, of course, and he can kick his allies at enemies. And Knuckles is the power character. He can literally throw his allies like volleyballs at the enemies and do a little slow fall kind of thing as well. And the levels, of course, are based on this type of teamwork thing. What's crazier is that there's 3 more teams of characters. There's also Team Dark, which is Shadow Rouge, and a new character called E123 Omega?
Yes, that's correct. Omega. He's basically supposed to be like what would have been E102 from Sonic Adventure 1.
Yeah. But I love Gamma because he is just bloodthirsty. Like so many of his like quotes in that game are great. Like he says "kill" and "worthless consumer models."
Yes,
Love
yes,
it.
love those lines.
So, then there's Team Rose, which is Amy, Cream, and Big the Cat. And then we get the return of the Chaotix, which is Espio, Charmy, and Vector, and they've thankfully stayed around since. They got some new designs though. Like Vector is especially different. Like he doesn't really look anything like he originally did. But it's cool to have them back. And like I said, all of them work in those three different teammate things, like the Sonic team. Another thing to keep in mind about the game, though, is that each team actually has a different theme. Sonic's Team Sonic is the normal mode. Team Shadow, or Team Dark, I guess, is hard mode. Team Rose is easy mode, and Team Chaotix is mission mode. And not that the game tells you that. You basically have to figure this stuff out on your own. It's kind of annoying. Which brings me to my opinion on the game is that it's terrible. I do not like Sonic Heroes. I found it very annoying to control. The speed characters are very slippery. Generally, a lot of times I'd be playing as the flight character because you have better control of them. And even then, the game is very, very tough, and the levels get really, really long by the end of it all. And like I said, I am just not a huge fan of it. I don't think it's a terrible game. Like it works. It's not like Sonic 06 where it's broken, but it's just wasn't my thing.
I hear you there. It's like they were just trying to do something experimental at the time and just kind of throwing stuff at the wall to see what would stick.
Oh yeah,
And you know, I mean, it's okay. If I had to rate the game, I'd give it like a 75 out of 100. Um,
a good old C.
that's what I would give it because like I remember playing it as a kid. I was like, okay, this is cool, but you know they kind of set the bar so high with Sonic Adventure 2 at that point that you know that's kind of the level I was expecting when they were going to do the next 3D game, and Heroes just didn't meet that for me.
I guess that's a good point because Sonic Adventure 2 actually has very tight controls, so I can see why it was kind of not as well received.
Yeah, and if you're playing Heroes on PlayStation 2, I can tell you as a PS2 owner back in the day, the controls were just not good, and it just didn't work that well.
Yeah. Oh well. Anyway, another game that I do like is Sonic Battle for the Game Boy Advance. This one is yet another Sonic fighting game, and lo and behold, it's really fun. This one is very fascinating, though. It's sort of an open 3D fighter, and what I mean by that is that every area that you can fight in is very large, and it's basically just like a little tiny compact platformer that you can just run around in and beat each other up inside of. It's very fascinating. And even better, there's a ton of playable characters, and they're all drastically different from each other. It's really amazing how well made this game is. It can play up to like 4 players. The main character you play as, which is Emerald, is like robot who like loses his memory and then becomes a good guy with Sonic and his pals. His main gimmick is that he can scan the powers of the other characters and then mix and match their abilities on himself. So it's a really fascinating game. The story is kind of dumb, but you know, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's more about the fighting in it, and I just thought it was really neat. Like so many Sonic characters are in this game, and you can play them all. They all have different abilities, and it's really cool. So yeah,
Yeah. I never got to play Sonic Battle, but I had friends who owned it, and they would tell me the game was absolutely fun. And I've watched video of the gameplay, and it does absolutely look fun.
oh yeah. Like I said, it's really cool how every character has different powers. Like I believe everyone even has like a separate type of like jumping capability. It's very interesting. Like Rouge, like she can float through the air, not like Knuckles gliding, but she sort of like does a slow fall. Like Knuckles does his glide, Tails can fly. Amy has a double jump. Like there's all sorts of neat stuff they did with it. It's really cool.
And fun fact, I do know that Sonic Battle has a plot line that it started that then concludes in Sonic Advance 3.
Yes, and we will get to that. But next up in that same year, there's also another game for the Game Boy Advance called Sonic Pinball Party. I actually didn't know about this one until I did research for this. But it's exactly what you think it is. It's just Sonic Pinball. So it's not even like Spinball where there's like actual places to run around. It's just literally Sonic's the ball and you just knock them around kind of thing. It's cute.
That's cool.
Yep. For mobile, we got another Sonic game in the form of Sonic Racing Kart. Again, exactly what you think it is. It's just a Sonic racer. But more importantly, during this year, Sonic X came out, which is yet another animated show, and this one's interesting for also being its own type of story. However, this one is a bit more popular than Sonic Underground.
Interesting. I never even heard of this one.
Sonic X?
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Sonic X. I couldn't hear you because the Discord chat like bugged out for a sec.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah. So
Yeah, but
Sonic X, absolutely.
oh yeah. The story behind this one is that Sonic and his friends at the beginning of the story, something happens to Dr. Eggman's machine, and all the characters surrounding that area just get whisked away to Earth. So yeah, we've got that whole like storyline that a lot of like kids shows would do, which usually I'm annoyed at, but this one's actually kind of fun in how it works, especially because it introduced us to a character that is very contentious in the Sonic fandom, and and that character is Chris Thorndike. He is this
Yes.
he is this little kid who's like the only child of two rich parents, and Sonic befriends him, and at first the whole point is that they're trying to hide Sonic and his friends while Dr. Eggman attacks Station Square, kind of thing. It's very cute how they like brought in elements from the Sonic games and sort of put them together. Like I have to say they were very smart in how they did that. But yeah, it's just, Sonic and his friends trying to stop Dr. Eggman while keeping secret. After the first season, I think it's like it becomes well known that they're around, kind of thing, and they're just like part of the population at that point. But yeah, it's very simple. It's a very like monster of the week type thing. Like every episode, Dr. Eggman throws out some new robot that Sonic has to defeat, kind of thing, and sometimes it's themed on like a specific character or whatnot. It's the usual kids show flair.
Yeah, it's usual kids show flair. It basically it did cover the plot lines of Sonic Adventure 1 and Sonic Adventure 2 with some original plot lines mixed in. I think for the first two seasons basically, and then the third season went off the deep end with that Metarex arc about the space alien robots that they had to go fight and deal with.
Oh, I didn't know about that part.
yeah. Like there was like a third season that was just an original plot line that just had nothing to do with the games and like took place in outer space. And as
Cool.
for Chris Thorndike, here's my opinion on him. He's budget Sora. He is budget, he's I call him budget Sora. It's like if you look at him next to Sora from Kingdom Hearts, they look very, very similar. So I call him budget Sora now.
Yeah, I can see that. He definitely looks like Sora if like a small child drew him. So yeah. After that is 2004. Here, Sonic Advance 3 came out, which, like you said, is a continuation of Sonic Battles storyline, which is very fascinating. Basically, like an evil emerald is made by Dr. Eggman, and like, if I recall, it's been a while, but I believe the storyline is that Dr. Eggman like split the world into multiple parts, and now Sonic and his friends have to go stop him. This game's also interesting because it also does something similar to Sonic Heroes, in that you have a team of characters. Only this time it's just two. But what's fascinating is that you have 5 different playable characters: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Cream again, and you can mix and match who's with who. Like you can have one character as the lead and one as the secondary, and every single team up creates different effects. Like different passive abilities will happen. Different their characters' regular abilities will change. Like if you put Amy with Knuckles, all of a sudden her hammer is now gigantic, kind of thing, and it has like a way bigger range. If you put Sonic and Cream together, Sonic will gain like a water bubble while he's underwater, so that he never has to worry about drowning. It's very fascinating what they did. And there's also like a special ability that every character can do with each other. Like if you hold the R button, they like get like magnetized to the lead character, and then they do like something interesting. Like if you have Tails as your follower, he'll go into flight mode and you can fly you both up to something. So it's really neat what they did with that game. I actually really enjoyed that one. I think it's my favorite of the Sonic Advance games. 2005, and this year, Shadow the Hedgehog came out, which is another interesting and sort of contentious game in the fandom.
Oh God, Shadow.
So an interesting thing about this game is that Shadow from Sonic Adventure 2 originally died. Sorry for the spoiler. But the idea is that they weren't going to bring him back. But then, all of a sudden, Shadow became extremely popular. so,
Yes, that's right.
so when Sonic Heroes came around, they were just like, well, I guess we'll bring him back. And so they did bring him back, and then they started this whole weird storyline about, whether Shadow might be an android or whatever, and this is a continuation of that. Basically, Shadow is like amnesiac, he's like, I don't know what happened, and all of a sudden, an alien comes out of freaking nowhere, and he's like, Shadow, you have to help me take over the world, and he's like, I don't know, man, should I be good or should I be bad? Oh, I hope I don't cut myself on that edge.
Oh god, the Ow the Edge memes that came out of that.
Yes, just from the very title itself. But yeah, Shadow the Hedgehog, its base premise is that you can go down different routes. So there's a bunch of different levels, and you can get to different ones depending on whether you act heroic, evil, or neutral. And you get different endings because of this as well. However, there is a one true ending, and that's if you defeat all of the levels, kind of thing. I think you have to collect all the Chaos Emeralds too, maybe? I forget.
Um, that's correct. I believe you have to get all the emeralds, but the thing is, the game has so many branching paths that I think there's over 50 stages, and you actually have to take every single path and get every single ending before you get one more like level option that shows up in the path, which means you have to play the game all over again, yet again, for that final path to like get to that level.
Jeez, that is way too much work for this game.
It's I to this day I still haven't opened all the paths yet, and like some of the missions are set up in a way that's like you have to be just right to make the conditions right to get to that next path and like jump over to the other set of levels, or else you lose your chance. You can't go back. You'd have to start your whole file all over again.
Ugh, gross. Well, anyway, another fun thing about this game is that Shadow can use guns. There you go. So yeah, it's a very silly game. It tries to take itself way too seriously, I feel, and but at the same time, I kind of love it because of how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, me too. And I can, as someone who has experience with firearms, I can appreciate the fact that Sega actually took time to research guns to figure out which guns to give him.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah,
actually pretty funny.
yeah. I was like, wait, they're actually using real weapons in this. They're not just cartoony guns. Wow. Okay,
Wow.
Sega. You do you.
Anyway, moving on to a game I actually have I like better. This also was the year that Sonic Rush came out for the Nintendo DS. So this is the first Sonic game on that portable system, and this introduced us to the character of Blaze the Cat, and she is one of my favorites. She's this. It's really weird to describe her, but I believe the best way is to say that she is like sort of an alternate dimensional version of Sonic if he was a princess cat girl with fire powers.
That is an accurate description, right on the nose.
Yes. So yeah, but the thing with Blaze is that she has a fun personality. I like the fact that she, unlike the other female characters we've gotten, she's not very girly. She's actually got like a very personal kind of way of acting. She's very shy. She's very awkward around people. She's introverted. And so when she's meeting other Sonic characters, she's like sort of like standoffish, but then it's like she warms up to them over time, and it's really cute, especially when she meets Cream, and it's like, oh my goodness, I love this game. Plus, I love the fact that you can play as both Sonic and Blaze through the game, so there's like two different playthroughs, and when you beat them both, you then get the final boss where they both go super, meaning Blaze is so far, I think, the only other character besides a hedgehog that has gone super.
Oh, it gets even better. Which, by the way, I'm also a Blaze fan. I think she's fantastic. She's
Hmm.
to date, she's the only female Sonic character that has a super form. None of the other women in Sonic have achieved a super form.
Oh yeah, that's another good point. So yeah, Blaze is I just like we just said we both like her, and mainly it's because she's just she's an interesting character. They actually gave her a personality, and that's not to say I hate other characters. Like Rouge is a fun character too, you know, but she's still very much like the sexy femme fatale specific kind of stereotype. But Blaze is not a stereotype. She's just an interesting character they made up.
Exactly, and I like the amount of character development they've given her over time in bits and pieces.
Oh yeah. Yeah, moving from there. Then there's Sonic Jump for mobile. This is kind of funny. It's basically a jumping game where you just go up and up and up as much as you can as different Sonic characters. Very simple. If you fall off, you lose. You have to start over. It's like the infinite runner type games where you just go as far as you can type of thing.
That's right. That was released for like the old iPhone.
Oh yeah. A lot of people think it was started on a smartphone. No, this started way back in 2005.
Yeah, when Apple literally just, excuse me, just came out with like the first iPhone.
Yep. Another game actually came out on mobile as well called Sonic Racing Kart 3DX, which I gotta say is a mouthful. Yeah, it's just another kart racer for Sonic characters. Again, also on those old style mobile phones. Not too interesting personally. But then, ooh, next comes 2006, where we get one of the most infamous Sonic games, known as Sonic the Hedgehog. That's its title, but it's been known as Sonic 06 now. And the reason why it's infamous, oh boy, apparently there was a lot of development issues as they went through this. Crap, what's his name? The guy who created Sonic, I think, left Sega?
That's correct. So during the development of '06, in the middle of the development cycle, Yuji Naka left Sonic Team.
And I don't believe it was like any like bad blood. It was just he decided to leave in general.
That's correct. He decided to start up his own game development company.
Yeah, bad timing though, I gotta say. But yeah, there was a whole bunch of issues that happened, and the game pretty much got rushed out for a Christmas release, and it is very clearly unfinished. The game is filled with an assortment of bugs and glitches and wonky physics, and I've never beaten this game because I could not stand it. I remember trying to get into the very first level, which requires you creating like a string of rings over the ocean to get to it, and the physics are so bad that despite this being a completely normal ability that Sonic has, like it's the light speed dash, I believe, where you can like go along a trail of rings, and it's been in like several Sonic games beforehand, it would keep not working for me. It would just fling Sonic into the ocean and he'd die, and I'd be like, wow, I'm getting game overs before I even enter the first level of the game.
I have dealt with that bug numerous times. I actually didn't get to play this game until 2010, when I finally owned an Xbox 360 by then. Um, and I can tell you I beat this game, and I'm a sucker for punishment because I experienced every bug under the sun. I probably
Ooh.
almost nearly rage quit like 10 times. Um, but I got through it. I beat the game. I got to see all the endings and everything, including the infamous Elise kiss.
Oh gods, yes. This is also the game that introduced Princess Elise, who is this very realistic human girl that Sonic has to help as she gets constantly kidnapped throughout the story by Dr. Eggman, who I think is the worst designed version of him personally. He looks really weird. But
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
I was gonna say they tried to make him realistic, is what they did.
Yeah, it's weird because this is why personally I like the later versions of the human characters in Sonic games. This game in particular is just weird looking to me because putting these very Disney-esque looking characters of the Sonic characters next to these very realistically rendered human people looks very off. Like, not off-putting, but it looks really weird next to each other.
It really does.
So yeah, and Dr. Eggman's the weirdest because he's a combination of those things. He's a realistic human being with cartoony features, like his suit and his mustache.
Yes. Um,
So yeah. Oh, sorry.
can I just add a little bit of tidbit of info on this
Ooh.
game? So, fun fact: this game that is well known in the community, despite how the terrible reviews it got, there are so many fans to this day that love this game and what it was going for that there's a group of individuals who've actually managed to remake this game on PC.
Yes, that's actually a good point. We should bring up the fact that in the Sonic fandom, there is a lot of people who love modding Sonic games because Sonic 06 is not the only one that's gotten this treatment as well. A lot of older games have also gotten either just stability increases as well as just fan games in general, where people just made their own levels and stuff. So the Sonic fan base just really loves going through this kind of stuff. And Sonic 06 definitely needed the help, that's for sure. But personally, I wasn't huge on the story. Like, I don't know. It's kind of a weird one. But again, it's because it got rushed. So who knows? Might have been better if they had actually made it properly.
Well, spoiler alert, for anyone listening, its story was so bad that it actually wiped itself out of the timeline.
It did?
Well, it's debatable now with the latest game that I've been playing, but apparently at the end of '06, when Elise has to blow out this flame of, I can't remember what it is, but it basically, if she blows out this flame, she'll lose all memories of Sonic and ever meeting them, and time will like reset. But then in the ending, there's a hint that apparently Sonic might still know who she is. So who's to say? But the running joke is the game basically wiped itself out of the timeline. So if it sucked, it didn't have to like affect the timeline.
Wow. It's almost like they knew. But yeah, also, oh yes, also Silver the Hedgehog was introduced in this game. Almost forgot about him. He's a time-traveling hedgehog from the future, where the world is like completely destroyed, kind of thing. And he's like, I've got to go stop whatever caused all this. And he gets like confused about who the actual problem is, and then he realizes and becomes a good guy, and blah blah blah. He and Shadow are also playable. Basically, you can play as 3 different hedgehog characters.
That's correct. And just something to add about Silver, he often gets compared to Trunks from Dragon Ball Z.
Makes sense. He's a guy from the future who's coming back to correct the problems of the past.
There's fans who have drawn Silver with Trunks' outfit.
Oh, of course. Oh, special thing about Silver, he is psychic, so he's able to do like telekinetic powers. I believe is like his specific power. So he's like able to move objects and enemies and throw them at each other, kind of thing. And I think he can float too.
You can. I will say that his gameplay segments were actually really fun.
Oh, well, that's good. Anyway, so that was fun to talk. But next up, also this year came Sonic Rivals, which is a PS portable game, and basically it was it's sort of like a mini game type of thing where like you play as Sonic characters fighting each other in like little mini arenas that are built sort of like platformer levels. It's really interesting. It's not exactly a fighting game, but you sort of fight each other as well. It's actually kind of neat, and a lot of people like this one.
Yes, I've actually played it. It's kind of fun.
There you go. Also this year came Sonic Riders, yet another Sonic racing game. Uh, Let me describe it. Pretty much, Sonic and a bunch of other characters are racing, and they use these like hoverboards, a la like Back to the Future type thing. And they use like air to like float through the air, kind of thing. They can like float a few feet above the air, ground. Sorry. And in this game, we were also introduced to 3 new characters: Jet the Hawk, Wave the Swallow, and Storm the Albatross. So I think these are our first like anthropomorphic bird characters, and they're known as the Babylon Rogues. And they're sort of like a neutral party, like they're neither good guys or bad guys, and they sort of help Dr. Eggman, who's trying to like use this race thing to like get the Chaos Emeralds, I think, to take over the world like usual. So it's the usual thing. Personally, I am not a fan of this series. I find this to be an extremely technical racing game, and I just did not. I could not wrap my brain around it. It is ridiculous, like what you have to do to make sure you're like moving forward. Because if you don't have enough air in the board, you'll end up like running along the ground, and you won't go as fast as you need to. And then every character also has like special abilities, and there's all these weird things that can happen, and you have to find shortcuts. And oh god, it is absolutely insane how this game works.
I can attest to that as someone who beat it.
Oh wow, better than me.
Yeah, it's well, they kind of did the whole Sonic Adventure 2 thing where there's two sides of the story that you play as. So, and then once you
Uh,
beat both sides, you actually get to the true final boss of the game. But I played through it, and yes, there's moments where you're just like, I could have swore I did this exactly as I was supposed to, and it just didn't work.
wow, that's ridiculous. So
Yeah,
yeah. Let's see. And also this year we had Sonic Speed DX for mobile. I don't know too much about this one. I believe it's another racing game. Since it's not really on like a major smartphone thing, so it probably didn't work that well.
yeah, I
So
don't.
that was the thing.
I would think that I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Anyway, 2007. This year we got Sonic and the Secret Rings. This is the first of two games that are known as, I believe, the Storybook uh, group or something like that.
That's correct. So there's the storybook series on the Wii.
Series. Thank you. So in this game, it's based on the 1001 Nights, so those Arabian tales. And Sonic meets like a genie girl who's going against like an evil genie guy, and it's like he's brought into a dimension and helping her out kind of thing. He's got like a special ring kind of thing, and it's fascinating because it's different in how it usually does things. Everything is from behind Sonic, so it's sort of like a third person view, and you're just kind of running forward. And I don't think you can back up; like you're just going forward most of the time. It's a fascinating little thing, and you're kind of railroaded into like how you do the level. It's a bit of a different take on doing a Sonic game.
Yeah, if I had to describe it, it's probably like using the speed boost in like the later Sonic games and like Unleashed, where you're boosting, but the difference is here, you like you said, you can't turn back, and you're kind of on this rails path. So it's like there's only so much movement you can do. It's basically moving left to right.
Yeah. This was also special for the fact that it was on the Nintendo Wii. And what's special about this is the fact that the Wii was very much about the whole motion control thing. This is really what started it all, because this is now a thing these days. But yeah, in this game, you use those motion controls to move Sonic around in a way, and it's awkward, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah, I've never personally played it, but I watched someone else play it, and I'm like, that seems really weird to try to do that. I'd be too tempted to try to use the directional pad.
Yeah, it might have worked better that way, but I get why it happened. The Wii was a big thing. Nintendo was very much like, we want to put as many games with motion controls on them as possible, so whatever. But from what I know, it's not like a horrible game. It's very technical and it's just tough to really get through. Otherwise, from what I've heard, the controller actually not horrible kind of thing.
Yeah, I heard it's okay. It's not the best, but it's okay. It gets the job
Yeah.
done. Um,
Yeah.
a
Let's
plot
see.
a
Oh,
plot point
sorry.
real quick. Just a plot point I wanted to stick in for anyone who follows Sonic lore. The storybook series, I think they specifically made it its own series so that it doesn't impact the timeline.
Oh, well, that's good. Although, considering Sonic is brought into a different dimension, I guess it really wouldn't cause too much trouble to the main timeline. So.
That's true.
Anyway, next up, Sonic Rush Adventure also came out this year. I really like this one as well. This is just like the previous game where you played as Sonic and Blaze, both had their two storylines. It also introduced the character of Marine the Raccoon, whom I think is a very adorable character. She speaks with an Australian accent, and she's all about the water, hence her name. And yeah, it's just Sonic and Blaze are going through this place, figuring out what's going on. Uh, Dr. Eggman Nega, sorry, I forgot to mention him before. He was introduced in the previous Rush game. He's causing trouble again. He's from a different dimension. He comes from Blaze's dimension, kind of thing. So, usual fare kind of thing.
Yes. I will say the theme song they went with for Rush Adventure is very catchy.
Cool. I'll have to listen to it sometime. Let's see. Oh, and next up, Sonic Rivals 2 came out this year. Sorry. It's just like the previous one, just, new levels. They added a few more characters. I think Blaze was added to it as well. So, yeah. Same old, same old.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, Sonic Casino Poker for mobile came out. It is exactly what you think it is. It's Sonic characters playing poker. But what's really interesting this year is that Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games came out. This is the first game in the series because these have been coming out every single 2 years since they started, so for every Olympic Games. And this came out, of course, on the Wii and DS because, Nintendo characters, they're only allowed to come out on that kind of thing. This is very like Mario Party-esque. As you play various different Olympic games, like volleyball, track, uh, baseball, and all sorts of other stuff in it. And it's just with Mario and Sonic characters, which is fun to look at because it's like, oh wow, it's fun to see like Princess Peach and Amy Rose in the same game kind of thing. It's very fascinating, and also I think like the two styles work extremely well together. They almost look like they're from the same game in the first place.
They do, and I have to give credit to Sega's development team because Sonic Team didn't develop this game. It was actually Sega Sports Research and Development that did it, which at the time I think they were known as Smilebit in Sega's list of studios that they had within the company. Um,
Oh, cool.
so it's not usually Sonic Team who develops the sports games. It's usually Sega's Sports Research and Development department.
Well, there you go. Makes sense to give it to someone who knows that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Next is 2008, and this year we got Sonic Unleashed, another contentious game in the fandom. Not as badly, I don't think, mainly because there is still a lot of like regular Sonic gameplay in this, but it's also introduced what is known as the Werehog. Basically, what happens in this game is that Sonic gets cursed somehow by Dr. Eggman. I forget exactly what happens, but now he can transform into essentially a werewolf at night, and he's just like a big burly version of himself kind of thing. It's rather interesting. And what this does is it makes it so that instead of running around, he now fights enemies in sort of a beat 'em up kind of thing.
Yes, that's correct. I first played the game on PS2. It plays drastically differently than the 360 version. This just a bit of background. This game originally would have been Sonic Adventure 3 in its development history. Um, and we have to give a lot of credit to this game because it kind of lets us get Sonic to where he is today because of the big shift it caused in the series, especially with the Hedgehog engine, the game engine that they made this game for, was carried over to a bunch of different games after this.
Oh, okay. So I didn't realize this was the first game for that. In case anyone's wondering, the Hedgehog engine is simply the engine they use for building Sonic games, and they've been doing that ever since this game.
Yep, that's correct.
Yep. So in this game, we're also introduced to the character of Chip, who's basically this little fairy furry. Like he looks like a little like sort of foxish looking thing with like little fairy wings, and yeah, he's very important to the story. From what I know, Dr. Eggman like caused like the world to break apart, and instead of everyone dying, they just kind of float there together, sort of together.
Yes.
So yeah. So you go through the game just playing both as normal Sonic during the day and Werehog at night kind of thing. You collect these coins and eventually you can get everything back together and then you fight the final boss and blah blah blah.
There's a meme that has still persisted since this game where, because of the night stages, when you're doing the combat at night as the Werehog, there's this jazzy battle music that plays every time you run into a group of enemies and you have to fight them.
Oh, that's right.
And that same jazz theme is always the same every time. And it's so repetitive that it's now a meme today that, like, like if you look at any YouTube video of the jazz song playing, the comments will always say, "Oh, imagine hearing this for 1 hour. That must be a really hard battle."
Yes, I'd forgotten about the battle theme and how infamous that is. So yeah, like I said, this is an interesting game. I'm personally not a fan of the whole Werehog thing. When I play Sonic, I just want to play it for the speed thing. If I want to do a beat 'em up game, I'm gonna play a beat 'em up game. But at the same time, I don't hate the game. It's like you said, if a lot of these things hadn't happened, we wouldn't have the later stuff in Sonic anyway. So they had to kind of trip forward to make better stuff.
Correct.
Let's see. Also during this year, we got Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, the sequel to Sonic Riders. I also don't like this game. Again, I still find it way too technical.
Yeah, it's the same thing as the first Riders game. Literally, same thing. They added one other new mechanic, and they gave you the ability to play some other characters that you couldn't play as before. But story wise, you're not missing much. The Babylon Rogues come back. Um, some other thing is happening that they're involved in. Uh, and the final battle is like with this giant space meteor monster thing. It's like literally a race to like catch up to it to hit it. So
Oh.
yeah, you're not really missing much.
Ah, yes, the usual fare of if it's not Dr. Eggman causing trouble, it's some sort of weird godlike being.
Ain't that the
uh,
truth?
yep. Also, Sonic at the Olympic Games came out. This was a mobile game, and it's just Sonic characters with the Olympic Games, not the Mario characters. So this was much more simple to make and easier, and just in general. They would do this a few different times with the Olympic Games, make it just a Sonic version versus the Mario and Sonic ones. It's very simplified. I forget if it was on iOS or not, but not that it matters.
Yeah, I can't remember which platforms it was on either, but as you said, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah. Also, Sonic Jump 2 came out. It's obviously the sequel to the original Sonic Jump. Same type of premise, not much different. However, this brings us to the one I find most interesting about this year, and that was Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood for DS. This Hoo boy. So let's start with the premise. Basically, this is a Sonic the Hedgehog turn-based RPG, the one and only so far. And it's also developed by BioWare. You know, the guys who made like Dragon Age and I'm forgetting the others now.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what other titles that studio developed, but they're
Yeah, there's
notorious
no.
in the industry.
Oh yeah, they made a lot of nice stuff. But the thing about this is that BioWare was not the problem with this. In fact, BioWare could probably have made something really good if it weren't for a certain problem that loomed its little head. And that name is Ken Penders.
Penders.
Yes, so I guess we're going to have to talk about it now. So, small history. Back when Sonic first started, back in the early 90s, and it got super popular, Sega was like, oh my god, we need to milk this cow as much as possible for as long as possible, which for them was lucky because Sonic is still very lucrative, even now. But basically, Ken Penders was one of many, many, many Americans and others that were brought in to just think of ideas and throw stuff out there, see what sticks, and make something interesting. And so he helped out, and he specifically was helping out with like the Sonic Sat AM and the Archie Sonic comics. He was a writer for that kind of stuff, and a lot of the stuff he helped create, is there. I don't know if he specifically was the creator of any one particular thing, um, but he seems to think he was, because what happened around this time is that Ken Penders realized that he could try and take copyright control of a whole bunch of characters that were in the Archie comics. And what's worse is that both Sega and Archie comics fumbled themselves. They were really dumb about it. Basically, Sega did not take him trying to sue them over these copyrights very seriously, and Archie Comics, for some reason, could not find the paperwork as to who owned these characters. So, yeah, a giant legal fiasco happened where eventually Sega decided that they were not going to work with Archie Comics anymore and caused the entire Sonic comic line to abruptly cancel. In other words, Ken Penders destroyed an entire generation's worth of people's childhoods.
Yep, with the stroke of a pen, literally. I mean, he technically now owns all of those characters that were there, so Sega can't use any of them. Um,
That is correct.
and it turns, I'm reading an article about him right now, and he worked for Archie until 2006. And then, from what I'm seeing, the comics were still going on without him, but then sometime in 2010 is when the legal fiasco happened, and I remember hearing about it back then. Um,
Yeah, I was just trying to simplify it. But yeah, this is one of the things where he tried to cause trouble. Now, technically, he did actually do this later in 2010, 2 years after this game came out. But the reason I brought him up for this particular game is because of a character that appears in it, which I believe is named Shade the Echidna.
Oh, this is coming back to me now. Yes, that's right.
Yes, basically, he made the argument that Shade the Echidna looked too similar to one of his characters from the Sonic comics, and everyone, including BioWare and EA, who owns BioWare, laughed him off because this did not work. Because let's face it, just because she looks like one of those characters doesn't change the fact that she also looks like Knuckles. You know, the character that is actually owned by Sega, the character that all those other echidnas is based on. So yeah, thankfully this did not work. However, because of the huge fiasco going on in general, it did cause a lot of trouble and made it so that this game actually had some problems in development because they were waiting to see what was happening with the copyright. And because of that, it ended up with the game sort of having bad sales. And yeah, it was a huge problem, and the game has ended up being sort of infamous because of this situation.
That's correct. And it looks like BioWare was actually really passionate about the game and they wanted to like try to make a sequel. They even left it open for a sequel. But once BioWare was bought by Electronic Arts, EA, the sequel plans were dropped because EA had obviously other priorities for BioWare.
Yes. Now, that all said, I have played through the game, and I'll be honest, I feel it's a little cheap. Like, there's a lot of MIDI music, a lot of the sound effects are very, like, canned stuff that you can easily buy for free, and I also found that some of the mechanics in the game are a little broken, especially when you get one of the secret characters, Cream the Rabbit. She is insanely powerful in this game, just like she was in Sonic Advance 2, only instead of being offensively powerful, she is defensively powerful. She has an ability that heals the entire party, and you can keep replenishing whatever the game's equivalent of like magic points is constantly. So she basically makes the entire team immortal. It's kind of silly.
Yes, the equivalent of MP in this game is PP. And no,
Thank you.
that is not a joke.
But yeah, so yeah, this game is, like I said, infamous because not so much for the actual game itself, even though, like I just said, I think it's a little cheap. But it's not like the most horrible thing. It works. It doesn't have like major bugs or glitches or anything. It's simply just the history of what happened and what Ken Penders did. Like I said, Ken Penders is just he was a terrible person for what he did, and he continues being a terrible person. If you follow him on Twitter, you know full well that he is constantly acting like he was the victim and that everyone is an asshole for not letting him take control of everything. And I believe he even like made threats that he would like uh, sue Paramount over the Sonic movies that came out recently.
That, yes, I heard something about that. He now has his own. He took his character from Archie, by the way, Laura Sue, and he like
Uh,
made his own series out of that because legally he can. So
yes.
that, yeah, I follow him for purely the entertainment value.
Yeah, I think his 2D art is fine, but the 3D art that he uses for his comic is so ugly.
Oh yeah, his 3D art. It's like, ooh, yeah.
Yeah, it's really gross, and like I said, he's a gross person for what he did and keeps trying to do. It's not working anymore, thankfully. Thankfully, the only thing he screwed over is Archie Comics, though. I say that very liberally. Like, I feel so terrible for all the fans who love those comics. Like, it went on for so long. Like, it started way back in the early '90s, and yeah, by 2010, he caused the whole thing to come crashing down.
And he's the reason why I think Sega is hesitant on like including the freedom fighters in anything that's in the modern games because they're afraid of like stirring that pot again.
Yeah, that's the thing to understand here is that he didn't gain control of all the characters Archie Comic had made. Several of the earliest ones, like Sally Acorn, do in fact belong to Sega, so they could use them if they wanted to. But like you just said, they're really afraid about causing that trouble. Even though I personally think they could easily take Ken Penders on and just throw him down and be like, "No, screw off." But I get why they're a little afraid. I probably would be too, no matter how much power I have. But yeah. Anyway, so that's that. Let's move on to nicer things, shall we?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Next is 2009. Here we get Sonic and the Black Knight. This is the second game in the storybook series, and it's of course based on the Arthurian myth. Sonic is brought again into another dimension by a little girl named Merlina. Obviously, she's meant to be like a female Merlin. And in there, you meet a whole bunch of Sonic characters who are playing the roles of various Arthurian characters. Like Amy Rose is the Lady of the Lake. Knuckles and Shadow and Blaze are the various Knights of the Round Table, and you're going up against a villain that looks who's described as being King Arthur kind of thing. So it's very cute what they do here. Sonic even gets a sword in the form of Excalibur, I think it's what it's called.
Yes, he actually gets Excalibur.
So yeah, and it talks to him if I recall.
Yep, it does actually. It has some witty banter with him.
So yeah, it's pretty neat. I think like as wonky as the controls can be, just like the previous one, I do think it's pretty cool giving Sonic a new feature. Like he's able to fight while running, which is a really cool idea for a character like Sonic. So I think it was pretty neat what they did here. Like I said, I don't think the controls are particularly great, but I don't think it was horrible either, and the idea is really neat, and it would be fun to see this like revisited, if not like redone with like proper like controllers in mind.
Right, and I can say plot wise, I appreciated what this game tried to do because it actually included a bunch of characters from Riders as like knight versions of themselves, and it also
And
includes Blaze as a knight.
yes, the fun part, I remember, I forget which particular knights they are, but I do know they were actually smart in who they decided to be, because they are actually based on the actual character's personality. And I know Blaze's was based on, like, Arthur's most loyal, like, good knight kind of thing. So I thought that was pretty cute.
Percival.
Percival, thank you.
Yep.
So, also this year, we got Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games. So this is the second one in the series. Obviously, like I said before, this came out every 2 years based on whichever Olympics was going on, either summer or winter. This is just like the previous one, only it's the winter games instead. So you got skiing and snowboarding and ice skating and all that fun stuff. Which I gotta say, it's really cute and funny watching both Bowser and Dr. Eggman do ice skating. It is hilarious.
Indeed, and the outfits that they give them sometimes kind of look funny on Dr. Eggman.
Oh my god, that's right, they gave him outfits. Oh god, it was great. So, I will just say this, the Olympic Games are actually really fun games in general. That's why that series has gone on. Like, people love them. It's really cute to watch these characters and just really fun. Like I said, it's got that Mario Party feel kind of thing to it where it's very simplified. Even young children can play it.
Yep.
Yep. Next is 2010. In this year, we got Sonic Colors, which is, to this day, one of my favorite Sonic games. This is where I feel they finally were able to latch down and really get a good feel of how the Hedgehog engine works, because I feel the controls in this game are very tight. I really enjoy this one, both in the Wii version and in the DS version, because there's, of course, two different versions. But
Right.
yeah, in this game, Sonic finds out that Dr. Eggman has made a giant amusement park in space, because of course he has. And he's basically captured all these little cute aliens, and whenever Sonic touches these aliens, he gets different kinds of powers. Like, the orange ones can turn him into a rocket to fly upward, the pink ones turn him into, like, a giant spike ball, and there's all sorts of fun stuff. There's, like, a whole ton of them. There's, like, 15 of them or something. It's really crazy, but it's really well thought out. The controls are tight, and it's really fun to play in general.
Yes, yes, it's a really fun game, and it's so popular to this day that Sega actually had a studio remaster it for them. Um, in 2021, Sonic Colors Ultimate was released.
Yes. That one's kind of funny because I remember that one having some issues, if I recall.
Yeah, they had to release a few patches for it. I have it for PlayStation 4. It's not bad. It's still a fun game.
It's good. Yeah, another thing I love about this game and why it's one of my favorites is because it feels like sort of a back to form kind of game. The game is very bright and colorful, which is one of the things I love about Sonic games. And the other thing is that the characters are very comedic in this one. Sonic is constantly making silly quips about stuff. Tails is constantly like rolling his eyes and groaning at Sonic's puns. Dr. Eggman is constantly like making accidental jokes about things. Both the characters of Orbot and Cubot, two robots that work with Dr. Eggman, are they're very like lazy and bemoan having to work for Dr. Eggman. It's an absolute riot to me. I love the fact that these characters are so silly and adorable. I love everything about it. I also love the fact that it's got a very experimental soundtrack. It's one of my favorites in the series. It's very fascinating to listen to it all.
Yeah, it's like a kind of fusion of like pop and rock, but like it's
Yeah.
very uppity. I can't describe it. Very positive sounding, and
Yes, it's like you said, it has like a pop and rock sound. I'd also say it has something of a classical sound too, so it's sort of mixing all three genres together. It's very fascinating.
it really is.
So yeah. Next in this year, we also got the start of a series that didn't last too long, unfortunately, called Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1. Yeah. So this is exactly as it sounds. It's meant to be similar to the classic Sonic games and sort of a continuation after Sonic 3. Unfortunately, this game did not do too well, and the same goes for its sequel, which we will get to. From what I know, I believe there was a lot of problems with like glitches and bugs with the game. I can't quite remember.
I think so. I think that was some of the problems. There were some weird glitches, or not even the glitches. It was the physics. They couldn't properly replicate the physics of the previous 2D Sonic games from the Genesis era. So that was a big point that turned a lot of people off. Was that, and
Okay.
I think what also rubbed some salt in the wound was the fact that this was the same studio that developed the advanced games, because Sonic Team didn't make the advanced games or this one. It was actually Dimps that they contracted it out to. And I think people were like kind of like not happy with Dimps after this game.
Oh, that sucks because the Sonic Advance series was very well made. Man.
And I think this is what the game that like caused the relationship between Sega and Dimps to kind of not continue, because for a while we didn't get any other games after this that like Dimps worked on for them.
Well, dang. Well, sorry to hear that. Oh well. Anyway, next up we have the last in the line of the Sonic Riders games in Sonic Free Riders. From what I've heard, this one's not as technical as the previous two, and I think a lot of people like it better for it, but at this point I was already soured to the series, so I never tried it.
Yeah, I've got no, but I don't have much to add here either.
Alright, cool. Next. Next up is that Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games. This, of course, is the Sonic equivalent to the previous Mario and Sonic at the Winter Games, just for mobile as well. Also, we got Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, another Sonic racing game, but instead of it just being Sonic and his friends, they also put in a whole bunch of other Sega characters, which was great to see because it meant we got to see a bunch of characters that had not seen the light of day in years.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, characters like Ooh La La from Space Channel 5 showed up. There was also, like, I from Super Monkey Ball. But the character that I love the most is they put freaking Vise from Skies of Arcadia, and I am a huge fan of that RPG.
Yeah, that was a really nice touch adding him in there. I'm sure though, because not the because that game only was out on Dreamcast. There's probably a lot of people who didn't recognize him, except people our age who had a Dreamcast at the time.
Oh yeah, yeah. That game only came out on Dreamcast, and then there was like an upgraded port that came on GameCube, and that was it. That's the only time it's ever been seen. Though I do believe it's on Steam, so I think I might buy that.
There you
But
go.
anyway, so yeah, this game was very popular actually. A lot of people really liked it. There was also at this time, I believe, the movie Wreck-It Ralph had come out, and they, for a special promotion, they put Ralph in as a playable racer as well, which I think was a really cute thing to do.
Yep, that's right. I remember that. I ended up downloading the DLC for that back then.
Yep. And in case anyone's wondering why Ralph will be in this game, it's because Sonic is in the Wreck-It Ralph movie. So there you go.
Yep.
Next up is 2011. Here we got frickin' Sonic Generations. I love this game. I love the idea behind it. Basically, Sonic meets his old self from the past, and it's like the original classic style and how that character is designed. So it's basically the more modern Sonic and the old classic style Sonic both playing side by side. You can swap between them, and both their levels are exactly what you think. The classic Sonic character gets the classic style of 2D play, and the modern character gets the 3D style of play. And it's very fun, very cute, colorful, and even better, you're going through time and you're basically going through 3D versions of older Sonic levels. It is so cool to see like Green Hill and Chemical Plant and gosh, so many of these levels done up in like much better looking 3D, because even some of them that come from the 3D games, they look so beautiful in this game. It is absolutely gorgeous. I love this game so much.
And I think part of the reason why the game looked the way it did was because this was like the highlight of the Hedgehog Engine 1. Sega, like at this point, has already had so much experience with the Hedgehog engine, they just dialed up all the graphics to max.
Yep. It's a whole lot of fun. A bunch of Sonic's friends are like sucked into time with them, and he has to like save them all, kind of thing. And then you have to go and defeat the evil time monster that Dr. Eggman has created. And of course, Dr. Eggman's old self is in here too, as well as the past version of Tails as well, who is downright adorable. So yeah, this game was a lot of fun, at least in my opinion. And yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fun game. I mean, to this day, I'll still play it. I actually ended up buying it for Xbox 360 just so I could play it on my Xbox Series X with 60 frames per second turned on.
Yeah, it's one of the few Sonic games I actually own on Steam because I just love that game so much. Let's see. Next also came out Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games. I'm sure you're wondering, why did this come out in 2011? Well, duh, because they were anticipating the next Olympics, obviously. So this, of course, is the next one. It's just like the previous ones. You play the summer games, blah, 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 Sonic, Mario characters. Yay.
Yep.
Next is 2012. Here we have Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2. This is unfortunately where the series ended. Like you said, Sega was annoyed with Dimp, and yeah.
Yep.
Oh wait, was that the right company?
Dimps is the correct company. Yep.
Okay.
This is basically where that relationship seemed to have ended.
Yeah, I will say this though, they did make Tails playable in this game, so that's the one thing to point out about it.
Yep, that's true.
Yep. Also this year, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transform came out. It's the sequel to the previous one. They added a few more characters as racers. It's very amusing to watch. What's his face from? Gosh, I forgot that game. Whatever. You know, I can't even describe anything. He's on a forklift. I know that. I just thought that was hilarious.
And just to mention, you mentioned Wreck-It Ralph with the first
Mhm.
Sonic All-Stars Racing. It looks like he was put in Transformed instead, so he wouldn't show up
Oh,
in the series until Transformed. Because I
oh,
remember that year's actually around the time the game came out. I mean, the movie came out that year.
gotcha. Sorry.
No, not a problem.
All right. Next is 2013, where we got Sonic Lost World. I found that this game is oddly contentious in the fandom. I don't really know why, because personally I love this game. I think it's honestly really fun. Basically, this is Sonic's answer to Mario Galaxy. Not exactly the same exact idea, like it doesn't play with gravity, but the entire game has sort of this like circular feel to it. Like Sonic is basically racing along giant cylinders, and you can like move around on all sides of the cylinder and kind of just fly around and hit enemies and all that kind of stuff. And personally, I thought it was a lot of fun. Like the fact that you're able to constantly keep going forward, but also have the choice of like jumping to another cylinder, or if you see things in the way, you could like move to the other side of the cylinder and like be like, oh hey, there's nothing down here to get in my way, and so on and so forth. It's a rather neat take on Sonic, personally.
It is, and a lot of people will make comparisons with the canceled Sonic Extreme in terms of having that fish eye kind of style viewpoint.
Good point.
So it's almost like it's a spiritual kind of nod to like Sonic Extreme in some ways.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a great idea to look at it for. It also introduced a bunch of demons, I believe, that each represent the 7 different Chaos Emeralds, which I thought was a weird little thing to do, but whatever.
Yep, that's when the Deadly Six started entering the plot line for the series.
Gotcha. Next up is Mario and Sonic at the Sochi 2014 Olympic Winter Games. Mouthful again. Obviously, this is on Wii U because that's the console is out at that point. Same fare as the usual, so Moving on. Next, we also had Sonic Dash for mobile. I believe this is the first proper smartphone Sonic game as well, and this one is exactly what you'd expect. It's a Sonic infinite runner with various Sonic characters, and I think it works perfectly. It's got a lot of great ideas. It's fun watching the characters race around, and it perfectly suits Sonic.
Hmm.
Also, we got a new arcade game again after years of not getting a new one. It's called Sonic Athletics, and it's basically based on track and field from like the Olympics, but the various Sonic characters. It's just that particular game. When you when you use this particular arcade, you basically have two bars on the side that you hold, and you have to like beat your feet as if you're running, kind of thing. And the faster you can do it, the faster your character will go. It's very amusing. It will wipe you out very quickly.
You know what? Actually, now that I think about it, you and I actually got to play something like this at round one at one point. It was like a similar cap.
yes, we Yes, we've played a similar one that was a Mario and Sonic based kind of
Yes,
thing.
right.
It's like a couple different like games within it, and it had that same kind of idea. You beat your feet kind of thing. I think we're doing like the long jump or something. It was very amusing.
It was. I just wanted to point out the similarity. That's all.
Yes. Next up is 2014. We got Sonic Jump Fever for mobile. The obviously a another sequel to Sonic Jump. It's the exact same thing, only with better controls because it's on a freaking smartphone.
Yep, it's another
Let's
mobile
see.
game that I've never even played.
Yep. And then, ooh, here's the fun one. Now we start the Sonic Boom series of stuff.
Oh
So
boy.
here we get, yes, so first we get Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric for Wii U. This game is infamous and unfortunately tarnishes the rest of the series because I think the Sonic Boom stuff in general is actually not bad. But this one is infamous for the fact that it had a terrible production and came out horribly glitched and bugged, and it's terrible in general. Unlike Sonic 06, which is a funny bad, this game is an absolute slog. I hated playing this game. I had no fun with it. Although I will say that the Knuckles glitch was hilarious because it basically made it so that you could jump infinitely in the air as if you were flying.
Yeah, that became a meme actually. And I never got to play this game because I never owned a Wii U, but I've watched video of people playing it. It doesn't look like it's very fun to play.
Yeah, it like I said, it sucks because I think the rest of the series is fine. For instance, we also got a 3DS Sonic Boom game in the form of Shattered Crystal. This one's okay. It's not like amazing, but the game works. There's no major bugs or glitches in the way. It functions properly. It's also 2D, which is interesting. It makes it so that every character actually has a unique ability, and you can swap between them. And you can play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and the new character Styx the Badger. Styx is fun. She's this sort of like conspiracy theory paranoid nutcase, and I absolutely adore her.
Yeah, Styx is great.
So, and she also uses a boomerang. So her whole thing is being able to like hit buttons that are far away and stuff like that. But also, what came out was the Sonic Boom animated show. This is a 3D Sonic animated show, and it's a lot of fun. Personally, I love it because it pokes fun at the fan base so much, and I absolutely adore it for that.
Yes, this was what started the Sonic's self-awareness arc, I'll call it, because after Boom, they started incorporating more of this type of humor in some of his lines in later games.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. Also, this is also the characters in this series get new looks because this is supposed to be like a unique universe disconnected from the games. So the characters here are much more elongated. I think they're like the tallest they've ever been, and they have a lot of bandages or wrappings around their like arms and legs, which I believe is like supposed to represent like people who like jump around on buildings and stuff. I forget what that's called.
Parkour.
Parkour. They're meant to look sort of parkourish in a way. But it's a lot of fun. Like I said, it's very comedic. It pokes fun at the fan base a lot, which is hilarious. My favorite episode is the one very clearly based on Stephen King's Misery, where Sonic gets injured and he's basically essentially held hostage by a fan who is basically reading him fan fiction as sort of torture.
Oh, that's right. I remember that episode. That was a good one.
It's so funny. I also love how like there's various other things like Tails, as innocent as he usually is, sort of thinks of himself as a bit too smart compared to everyone else. Knuckles is the best part. He is an absolute doofus, but he's always doing weird things that make it seem like he's almost a genius sometimes, and makes like really funny like observations about stuff. Amy's a lot of fun. She's very sassy. She very much plays up like the feminist view, but also has like a proper equality outlook on things, which she throws in people's faces a lot, which I love. And then, like I said before, Styx is hilarious. She's a paranoid weirdo who lives out in the woods and is always like thinking that someone is about out to get her or one of her friends, and so it's always her trying to like help people, but half the time she's like causing problems. It's really funny.
It is. It's a great show.
Let's see. Then we have 2015, where Sonic Runners is a proper game now. This is a very popular series of mobile games, and I believe it lasted for quite some time as well, didn't it?
Yes, it did actually. It went on for a while.
Yep. Like the previous one, it is exactly what it is. It's an infinite runner. You can play as various Sonic characters, and everyone has like various aspects to themselves. I think there's like three different types, kind of thing. But like I said, it works exactly how you'd expect. It's perfect for Sonic, and there you go.
Hmm.
There's also another game called Sonic Dash 2 Sonic Boom, and basically this just entered in the Sonic Boom version of characters. It's similar to Runners in its own way.
Yep.
Yep. Next is 2016, where we have Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, and oh yeah, we got South American music in this game. Otherwise, it's just like the previous Olympic Games.
Yep. If there's any difference between them, it's just with each generation there's a bump in graphics.
Yes. Also this year, we got Sonic Boom Fire and Ice, which is the sequel to the previous 3DS Sonic Boom game. This one's even better because they added in Amy as a playable character, too. I actually thought this game was pretty neat. I really enjoyed how it worked. It was fun playing them in the 2D kind of spectrum. It was fun to have Amy's hammer to play with, and yeah. Like I said, Rise of Lyric may be a bad game, but don't think that the entirety of Sonic Boom is really that bad. I personally think the two 3DS games and the show are a lot of fun. I totally recommend them.
Agreed.
Let's see. Next is 2017, where we get Sonic Forces. This game, I don't think it's so much contentious in the series, in the fandom. I mean, I think it's more that it was just sort of a weird game, because from what I heard people saying, it's very okay.
Um, yeah, it's kind of like '06 in that it's like very buggy. Um,
Oh, really?
yeah, it's a little bit of a buggy mess, and the physics are a little sticky in this game. Um, it actually it's kind of good that this game got the criticism that it got because it leads to some better things we'll cover as we get to a higher year or as we get to when we get to the current year. I'll say, um,
Okay.
but I'll
All
leave
right.
it at that for now.
Cool. Sonic Forces is interesting for the fact that they introduced, for the first time, a player avatar kind of thing. You can create your own furry in this game. Isn't that great? So yeah, you can create different kinds of furries. You just did a couple different animals you can be, and each one actually has different abilities. Like I believe the rabbit can jump higher, the bird has like a floating ability, various stuff like that. It's actually pretty cool that they actually thought to do that. And you can dress your avatar up with all sorts of stuff, and you get more and more clothing options as the game goes. So it's actually a pretty neat thing they did. People were very excited for this. The Avatar character also has like a special machine that they use that like grapples onto stuff. So they even have their own style of gameplay, which is honestly awesome. I think it's a great idea.
That's one thing I really enjoyed about it. They actually they get a gun basically that
Hmm,
changes depending on what wisp they have loaded in it. The wisp
gotcha.
from colors return in this game and serve as your power ups as the avatar character.
Yay! The Wisps are so cute. I love it whenever they show up. But Sonic Forces also had modern Sonic and classic Sonic again, so it's sort of like a sort of sequel to Generations, but not really.
Yeah. This is lore wise. This is where the waters get murky because of what this game did with the lore. Because this game was supposed to. Fun fact: this game coincides with Sonic Mania. Like they
Yes.
both released at the same time, and they have a consistent story between the two. Um,
Hmm.
but as a result of what happens in this game, it kind of for a little while screwed up the timeline of like Sonic, because then people were like, okay, so is classic Sonic a separate timeline than modern Sonic? And then that went on for a while until recently. And Sega kind of fixed the lore recently, but we'll wait till we get to the current year for that.
Gotcha. But this game also introduced the character of Infinite, who I believe is a jackal.
Yep, he is a Jackal, and he leads the Jackal Squad, a bunch of mercenaries that work for Dr. Eggman in this game.
Yes. So he's got this like weird power that like alters reality kind of thing. Uh, I think he's one of the weakest villains personally. I'm not gonna spoil why I think that, but it has to do with why he became a villain. So this game is basically playing those three different characters as you try to defeat Eggman and Infinite kind of thing. So anyway, but as you mentioned before, this is also the year we got Sonic Mania. This is a very interesting and pivotal game because it's the first proper game, I believe, that Sega hired just fans to make it.
Yep, that's correct. They hired the guys at oh crap, I forgot the name of the studio. Evening Star.
Evening Star, gotcha.
Um,
And they got a guy named Whitehead. I forget his first name.
Christian Whitehead. He's the head of
Christian
Evening
White.
Star.
Yes, he's a big fan of Sonic. He was known for making lots of fan games in the past. He also helped, I believe, create some updated mobile versions of older Sonic games as well for Sega.
Yep, that's correct. They use the same exact engine as Mania. He created the retro engine with him and his team, and then that engine's been used in every single game that they've worked on for Sega.
Right. And the thing with Sonic Mania is that it's similar to Generations, where there's sort of a time warp thing going on, and Sonic, or rather classic Sonic, is being brought through time to go through various levels from the classic era of games. So, like from the original Sonic the Hedgehog, 2, 3, and CD, which is pretty cool. There's also a couple of original levels thrown in there as well, so it's not completely like rehashing things. And it is a lot of fun. It's got very tight controls. The music is done by T. Lopez, who is a very well-known musician on YouTube tended to make a lot of Sonic remixes. So the music is downright wonderful to listen to.
Yep, he's great at what he does. Ever since Sega brought him on board for that game, he's been with them since.
Yep. He's also done various other games, like he did the music for the recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles beat 'em up game that came out, Shredder's Revenge.
Oh,
That
that's
music is
right.
freaking tight. But the game basically sports Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, all as playable characters. It even has a funny joke mode you can play called And Knuckles that will have Knuckles follow whoever you're playing as, including if you're playing as Knuckles himself, so you can have two of them at the same time.
Yep, which is pretty cool that you can do that.
Yep. And then later, they did an update to the game, which was sort of like a free DLC kind of thing. Like, they did not make anyone pay for this, called Sonic Mania Plus, that added in two more characters in the form of Mighty the Armadillo and Ray the Flying Squirrel. Yes, those two characters that have barely been used throughout the series, and one of them had not been seen since that arcade game back in 1993. They are now proper playable characters in a 2D platform format, and they're a lot of fun. Mighty himself is very defensive. He is an armadillo after all. If what I remember, if you're jumping as him, you can deflect any kind of projectile thrown at him. And he has a move that makes him slam the ground, and he can use that to find hidden pathways through the ground, which is pretty cool. And Ray breaks the game by having this really unique gliding feature, where where he basically functions sort of like a paper airplane, where you can make him go down and then up, and it sort of like keeps him in the air kind of thing. And like I said, he breaks the game because you can just fly super fast through everything.
Yeah, you can literally cheese your way through the game with him.
Yes, it's very amusing. There's also a special mode that was put in that kind of remixes the levels, and you can collect up all 5 of the characters to play, and you can like kind of swap through them throughout the game, kind of thing. It's really neat kind of thing to do. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, the soundtrack's great, and of course the updated graphics are great too. They basically took the old style graphics and just made them look even better.
Yep, and just something to add, that mode you're talking about is Encore mode, and plot-wise, it takes
Mhm.
place after the events of Mania mode and after the conclusion of Sonic Forces, when Sonic comes back from Forces back into the Mania's timeline. Because
Okay,
that's how
pretty
the two
cool.
games tie. Like the classic Sonic you were playing as in Forces was the Mania Sonic, but then at the end of Forces you send him back, and he ends up back in like his timeline. So Encore mode takes place after Forces, which I found interesting.
All right, pretty neat. Let's see. Oh, one other game came out this year, Sonic Runners Adventure. It was a mobile game. It's just the sequel to Sonic Runners. Again, not that interesting, just the usual like infinite runner kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. 2018 did not have any new Sonic games of note, so we're going to move on to 2019, where we got Team Sonic Racing, which is a neat little racing game. It takes the idea of Sonic Heroes, but puts it in a racing kind of context. Basically, you create a team of characters, and you all kind of help each other win the race. It's very fascinating how this works. I haven't actually played it myself, but I heard it's actually nowhere near as technical as you might worry it would be.
I have it for PC. It is pretty fun. It's really simplified. It's not that hard.
Oh yeah. So it actually did fairly well from what I remember. But unlike a lot, but like most side games, it's like people enjoyed it for a while and then just kind of dropped it. So, oh well.
Yep, that and its online support didn't last that long. They had online gameplay, but then they dropped it after a short time.
That sucks. I will say this though, it did have a fun animated short that started before the game came out, which I thought was really cute in what they did with it. It was very amusing and comical.
Yep, I liked it too. I've seen the short.
Let's see. Also this year we got Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020. Oh boy. So if you remember 2020, we all know that COVID happened. And yeah, it was kind of sad because the actual Olympic Games didn't happen that year.
Yeah, it's the first game that came out for an Olympics that doesn't exist. Um,
Yeah. That said, the Olympics that were supposed to happen in 2020 did happen. They just happened in 2021 instead.
yes, and when I was talking about us playing a one of these games at round one, it's actually this one that we played, but like the arcade version of it.
Oh yeah, I can see that. All right. Then next year in 2020, we got Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 for mobile. Again, it's just the Sonic version of the Olympic Games, the usual stuff. And also in 2020, we got the Sonic the Hedgehog American movie. So this is a big step for video game movies. And I would not say it's the first one that did it proper, but it's definitely the most popular one because this movie did exceptionally well.
It did. It did extraordinarily well. We also can kind of thank the fans for making sure that happened.
Oh yes.
Because of the first trailer that came out with the original model they used for him. We can delve into that, and I'll add pieces to that once you're done with your piece. So why don't you take it for that?
Oh, wasn't going to be much. Basically, uh, the fun thing about this movie is that when the original trailer came out, everyone, and I mean everyone, not just Sonic fans, but everyone hated the way Sonic looked. Everyone thought he looked horrifically ugly, and thus he has actually been dubbed Ugly Sonic to this day. But yeah, and because of that, Paramount, the studio that was making the movie, said real quick, they're like, you know what? Everyone hates how Sonic looks. I know it's going to be a huge amount of money to do so, but change that. And I believe about like 9 months later, we got a new trailer, and all of a sudden, Sonic looks like Sonic. He has all of his proper colorings and stuff. Like they obviously a little differences had to be made because Paramount wants to make their own version of Sonic, but it basically looked like a high res 3-dimensional version of Sonic. And yeah, it's like you said, it was just like a bunch of people were just like, no, this looks ugly and terrible. Please stop that.
Yep, and we can thank Tyson Hess for the redesign. He's the one who came up with Sonic's redesign for the movie, because Paramount was like, "Hey, Tyson, we know you worked on the animated cutscenes with your studio for like Mania and for like Team Racing and all
Mhm.
that. We know you're good at this stuff. Can you help us design a Sonic for our movie?" And that's when he was like, "Sure," and that's how we got the Sonic we have in the movies.
Yep. Tyson Hess is a part of group of it's a group of different people. It's one person of a group of different people. There, I said it right now. That has really helped Sonic just get a little better, I think, these days. Because that's the thing I'm noticing is that when Sega allows for fans to help out, it makes things a whole lot better. And like you said, Tyson Hess helped with making various animated stuff for Sonic Mania, but he also did a short-lived comic for the Archie Comics series that was based on classic Sonic. Only got 4 issues before it got canceled, unfortunately, due to, of course, Ken Penders. But he has since gone on to become the main artist for the IDW comic run of Sonic the Hedgehog, which we can all thank the stars can never be sued by Ken Penders because all the characters there had absolutely no input from him.
That's correct. They have no input from him. They are not owned by him at any level.
Yes, and Tyson Hess is just a better person overall. He's known for being very friendly, very nice. He's a wonderful person.
Indeed, he is. I follow him on Twitter.
Yes. So, yeah. Oh, wait, where were we?
We
Oh,
were
yes, the movie.
movie.
So, in case you don't know, the Sonic the Hedgehog movie made in America, it's a live action one. So Sonic is basically a little CGI Sonic that interacts with real people, and the basic story is basically that he was raised by a big old owl lady in his original dimension, and then he has to escape to another dimension because some people come in to try and get him, and it's assumed that Owl Mommy died or something like that, I guess, because she throws out a big ring and he goes through it to a different dimension, and eventually he ended up on Earth. So, and then he ends up with Cyclops as his daddy. Sorry, sorry. The actor that plays his human father in the movie is the same guy who plays Cyclops from the X-Men movies.
Yes, James Marsden.
Yes. So yeah, it's basically that kind of idea, the character from another world dealing with Earth kind of thing. And Jim Carrey plays Dr. Eggman or Dr. Robotnik. I think they're both. I think he uses both names in the movie.
I think so. Yes.
So yeah. So Jim Carrey's in the movie. He's of course a much slimmer looking Dr. Eggman, but that's not a huge problem, honestly. It actually kind of works. As much as I'm not a fan of Jim Carrey as an actor, I have to admit his eccentricism kind of works for Dr. Eggman. This crazy mad scientist who just wants to do what he wants and doesn't care who gets in the way kind of thing. Also, we're introduced to my personal favorite character of Mr. Stone, who is this government agent who works as sort of a second in command to Dr. Eggman. And he's just this poor, put upon assistant who, for some reason, does not see his lot in life as bad, but instead is very, very happy to work for Dr. Eggman and will totally be stepped all over him for it.
Yeah, he's literally Dr. Eggman's assistant. Like he's the guy that literally brings Eggman his lattes and his coffee, and like books appointments for him.
Yes. And like I said, for some reason, he seems to enjoy being treated like crap by Dr. Eggman. There's actually just a joke going out that he is in love with him in some way.
There's many references to that in the movies, and it's quite funny.
Oh yes, it's hysterical. I love it. Anyway, moving on. Next we have 2022, where Sonic Frontiers becomes a thing. We're now getting into this is the year of the modern Sonic games, as this is being recorded in 2022. But Sonic Frontiers is unique for the fact that it is the first proper open world Sonic game.
Yes, yes, that it is. They took a lot of direction from the newer Zelda games that are open world.
Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild, yes. They took a lot of cues from that. I've been playing Frontiers. I've been finding it fun so far. It's a very lengthy game. Um, it's like they took elements from. So the way this plays, Frontiers plays kind of like it's open world, but there's these stages you could jump into that are like your traditional like. If I could pick a game here, they're a lot like Sonic Generations. They're you fly through the stage, boost through whatever to beat the stage, and after you beat the stage, it unlocks other things on the islands because there's several islands in this game that you can visit. You start on one island, then you have to go to the next island. I'm still on the first island, and there's a plot in this game that's very big and has a lot of ties and callbacks to the previous games. So remember when I was mentioning about how Forces kind of like screwed up the timeline a little bit? Um,
Mm-hmm.
this game basically finds an explanation and fixes all of that. From what I've read so far, because I'm not far enough in the game, but apparently everyone has said that the lore for this game and the lore it adds is just astounding. And just to point out, there is one man we have to thank for that, Ian Flynn, the guy who works on the IDW Sonic comics, is writing for the games now as of Sonic Frontiers. He's officially their writer for the games now.
Okay, yeah, I remember hearing about him before, so that's pretty cool. That once again, he's like a part of that group of fans where it's like they're now more or less in control, kind of thing. So that's pretty neat.
Well, part of the problem was they had the two previous writers they had just they actually didn't know as much about Sonic, so like they kind of just guessed some stuff from what I
What?
heard. This is what I've heard. I don't know much about it other than like they kind of like just did the best with what they had, which I get it, but like after a while a lot of fans were complaining about the writing of the games, which is something you think most people didn't care about because they just want to pick up a game and play it, but you know, there's people wanted lore in the games, good lore. So and they wanted them to have a consistent story. So these guys weren't quite delivering that. So that's when I think they decided they had enough. They left, and that's when they brought Ian Flynn in from the comics because the comics right now are known for having a really good, consistent storyline that a lot of fans love. So it was a good move to bring Ian Flynn in for this game, and I think after the reception of this game, they're going to keep him going forward for the games too.
Sounds pretty good.
But again, I haven't played far enough to give any more info. I'm just gonna go as I can go. I did kind of spoil some stuff for myself on YouTube, but I'm not gonna go and spoil it because the game is still new. Um, but anyways, yeah, it's. I think this is the game that's gonna put Sonic back in his greater graces. Because even IGN was liking the game, and IGN's always harsh on Sonic when it comes to ratings.
Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, I wasn't particularly interested. It's for me, it's more the presentation. I'm not very big on its like very mellow feel kind of thing. I'm like, this is Sonic. I expect something a bit more vivacious, but at
Well,
the same time, it's like I get it. Some people are into that, so
well.
whatever.
Here's what I will say is that they found a way to keep like the traditional Sonic feel at the same time. Like while you're exploring, the music's all mellow and stuff, and when you're in combat, it amps up a little bit. But when you fight a boss, they went insane with the music. They had a bunch of bands do music, a dedicated song for every boss with vocals for that boss. Um, Something they've never really done in a long time.
Oh my goodness! And since you play a Supersonic for the bosses, I can only imagine.
It's nuts. And dude, they've made Supersonic OP. They literally have like before, Supersonic was like, oh yeah, he can do all this, he can withstand all this. No, no, they've added on to what Supersonic can do now. They might as well call him Supersonic 3.
Oh my god, I love that. I'm now imagining like his quills getting long, like Super Saiyan 3 does.
It's great. Like it's just nuts what they've done, and a lot of people have come back and praised the combat of the game and the boss fights. There's people saying that they want a boss rush mode just so they can fight all the bosses again because the presentation, the music, the lead up, the build up, the whole thing is just great. And all of Sonic's friends are in this series. The core four characters, Knuckles, well, Sonic himself, but Knuckles, Tails, and Amy are in this. And the point of the game is, with each island, you're freeing your friends. They're stuck in cyberspace, and you're freeing them.
Oh no.
So yeah, I'm enjoying it so far, and it's a long game too. It's not something you could just sit down and beat in like 2 or 3 hours.
Oh yeah, like as an open world game, it's like there's a lot of stuff to collect, I'm sure.
There's tons to collect. I'm still trying to learn everything that's in the game and all the abilities you can unlock and build up because you have experience points now and everything.
Fun.
And there's damage counters now. So like when you attack an enemy, you actually see a number, like you're taking away hit points.
Oh, okay, that's pretty neat. Oh, that's right, because you can fight in this game. Forgot about
Yep, you can
that.
fight in this game, and it's got RPG elements in it now.
Cool. So let's not spoil anything more and move on. Also, this year we've gotten a game called Sonic Speed Simulator, and this is a actual game that Sega allowed for the Roblox people to make. In case you don't know what Roblox is, it's how do I describe this? There's sort of an online video game creation system kind of thing.
Yeah, so Roblox is basically this giant. It's a game itself, but it's this giant sandbox that you could build like a game within a game with it. It's basically a roaming game engine
Yeah,
that you basically can build a game in a game. Um, and there's so much that people have built in it. It's its own like thing. And Sega, saw that and they made this game in there that people can play where you're literally playing as Sonic. You don't feel like you're playing Roblox when you play it because the graphics look so good. Um, yeah,
yeah. So that was an interesting thing. I did not know it existed till I did this research. But moving on, also this year we got the sequel to the first Sonic movie. It's Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And in this movie, we are introduced to Tails and Knuckles as well.
yes, that's right. They they started taking some story from the games with this one.
Yes, they took elements because since Knuckles is in here, they of course had to bring in like his backstory kind of thing. So I don't want to spoil it too much because the movie's still pretty new, but the basic premise is that Sonic's human parents they have basically taken him in as family, and they are going off to the wife's sister's wedding. Speaking of, I didn't talk about her before, but the wife's sister, the aunt, she is hilarious. She's my favorite character.
Oh,
I like her.
she's really really funny. In the first movie, she was funny, and then the second movie, they just took that and amped it up by 11.
So yeah, so that's the basic premise. I won't say any more. Like I said, I don't want to spoil it. Just know that Tails and Knuckles do show up in it. So we've got the three primary characters that most people would know about, and at the end, I do know, and I know I'm spoiling it somewhat, but there is going to be a Sonic 3, and they do nod at that at the end of the movie, and it was really crazy when we found out what it was. But like I said, not going to spoil that for you.
Well, we'll just say this: we, in a group of friends of ours, we all went to go see the second movie together, and the whole movie theater just went ape shit when
Yes.
they saw what happened at the end.
So yeah, yeah. I again, obviously, we thought the movie was pretty good too. Like it's like as much as I'm not huge on those like live action type kids movies, at the same time, I think they did a pretty good job on this. Like the fact that they got Tyson Hess to help in the first place, and just other types of fans, and the fact that there's actually a lot of references, not just to the Sonic games and shows, but even to memes, is actually a lot of fun.
It is. It really is a lot of fun. I love this series. I'm a huge fan of it. I will continue to support it in both its bad times and its good times.
And I will continue to laugh. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I also I am a big Sonic fan as well. I do enjoy the series. I'm not as nice as you are when it comes to the bad times, but I do agree. There are ways of making Sonic better, and plenty of people have done so.
Well,
But yeah,
in the previous games that we covered in this whole podcast, there was other commentary I wanted to add, but if we did that, this podcast would have been like another hour. Just for the simple fact that it was just so crazy with the amount of things that could have gone right, in the dark era, we'll call it.
Hey, maybe we'll make another episode about that.
We might.
So yeah, and that's that so far. That's all the stuff that I personally wanted to talk about for Sonic up to what we have now today. Is there anything more you wanted to add?
Nope. I think we've covered it all. I'm just gonna say, if you're a Sonic fan and you don't mind open world, please go buy Sonic Frontiers. Show Sega that we want them to do the kind of stuff they're doing with this game because it's taking it in a whole different direction that I think is going to be really beneficial to the series.
All right. Well, that's our episode for y'all. We hope you enjoyed it. I hope maybe you learned about a couple of new things like I did as well. And this was a lot of fun.
Indeed, it was. We'll catch you guys next time.
All right. Bye bye.
See you guys.